Subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Even knowing that he is not our own. But I still want to believe that he will make the most correct choice. Well, in the eyes of every mother. My children are all good in nature, but they are more naughty. 687 Listening to what Queen Frigg said. The worry in Odin's eyes couldn't go away no matter what. I wholeheartedly want to train my most valued eldest second son to become a qualified king of Asgard. But he inherited his militant and arrogant character from his youth. This is not the quality that a qualified king should have at all. If he didn't listen to his queen's persuasion, he designed to exile Thor to the earth. I don't even know that Thor at this moment doesn't have the ability to inherit his throne. Once you enter eternal sleep, enter the Soul Castle. Then Asgard, led by the warlike and reckless Thor, will definitely go to the abyss. And the youngest son, who has been neglected by him, is smarter, but he prefers to use some cleverness. If he didn't experience some heavy price, then he could never have the quality of tenacity. It could be ignored for a long time, or it can be said to be a preference for you. Loki's mentality gradually became unbalanced. Perhaps this time, he pretended to be stunned and entered the eternal sleep ahead of time, and banished Thor and let Loki take charge of Asgard for him. It can also be regarded as an experience for Loki. But at this time, Loki discovered the fact that he was not his own. Odin couldn't imagine what would happen if Loki made a mistake in his frustration. This is what worries him the most. In addition to his eldest daughter, he hated his own Hela very much at this moment. This was once the first in line to the throne of Asgard. Perhaps he is a qualified king. However, judging from the education of my 3 children, he is definitely not a qualified father. Don't worry so much. Gently holding her husband's hand, Frigga said with a gentle smile on her face. Taking this time, you should cultivate yourself so that the eternal sleep will come as late as possible. Thor will be exiled to the earth this time, although it will be difficult and even suffer. But I believe he will also mature and learn how to look at things from the perspective of a human instead of a god perspective. As for Loki, he is a good boy. All he pursues is to gain your approval and love. Listening to Frigg's words, Odin gradually closed his eyes. Frigg is the mother of Thor and Loki, so she should know the existence of the 2 sons best. With her here, I don't need to worry too much about whether Thor can grow or whether the roadbed will make a mistake. Perhaps I should have handed over the tutoring of the 2 children to Frigg back then. I should also rest for a while. Otherwise, I will wait until the moment when I enter the Soul Castle. It was the moment when Hela broke the seal and returned. After all, I have to wait until Thor fully grows up. Otherwise, it will be a disaster for the 9 realms. Watching BHBF. Odin closed his eyes and began to gradually restore his body with divine power. The gentle smile on Frigg's face remained unchanged, but there was a hint of sadness in the depths of his eyes. Yes, this time, Thor will be deprived of his divine power and exiled to the earth. It was designed by myself to persuade her husband Odin. I hope the owner of that black gold diary, that young man named Suche, the things in the parallel world he recorded are real, and they can complement this universe. Earth at the same time in Teowalan Cafe. I don't think so. Watch the news conference being broadcast live on TV. Steve shrugged his shoulders and said, although Tony, like his dad, likes to show off, but he probably won't just announce that he's the Iron Man himself from last night. After all, Peepo said when he came here that Chayeldi sent someone to contact her, hoping to tell Tony through her, don't admit it. Even the reasons have been found. So I don't think Tony is going to announce in front of the media that he's Iron Man. Looking at Steve, he is very confident, but his personality is still the habit of obeying orders 70 years ago. Suche put down his coffee cup and smiled. The refrigerator in my room is empty. Only a few bottles of soda are left. So, do you want to make a bet? Why don't you bet on something else? Hearing what Suche said, Steve hesitated a bit. After all, you are only 19 years old in this world, and you haven't legally drunk alcohol yet. Facing Suche's eyes, Steve smiled and raised his hand. Okay, don't mention this. Then use this as a bet. If I lose, I'll go and buy a lot of beer to fill your refrigerator. But if I win, Sue, I hope you can accompany me to a place. Looking at Sue Che, Steve smiled seriously. Although I really want to see her, but I can't make up my mind. After all, I can't imagine, when I appear in front of her, that I don't know what to say. I'm not even sure if she's okay with it, or if she wants to see an idiot who's 70 years late. Make a deal. Looking at Steve, he was full of hope, expectation, and entanglement. Sue Che stretched out his fist and touched Steve lightly. Anyway, the bet was won by itself. If only Tony Stark hadn't announced in front of these media that he was Iron Man. Well, he's not Tony Stark anymore. Chapter 80. Even Phil Coulson felt that it was too pitiful for Thor to be arranged soon. Stark Industrial Hall, press conference site. Mr. Stark, many people saw that you were Iron Man last night. Are you willing to admit this fact? Mr. Tony Stark, was it you who fought Obadiah Stane in armor last night? Mr. Stark, do you know that Silver Moon Knight? Why did he come to help you? Is the person holding the shield really Captain Rogers from Legendary? Mr. Stark, please answer our questions. Standing in front of the microphone, listening to the questions from the reporter below, Tony Stark glanced at the hand card that Agent SHILD had already written. Looking at the content on the hand card, it was nothing more than that I had a party with a group of models in a certain island last night, and there were no fewer than 50 witnesses, etc. Inexplicably, Tony Stark suddenly felt that it seemed to be meaningless. It's not that the content written on this hand card is meaningless. Instead, I feel that if I deny it, I will return to the kind of private laboratory that I stay in the villa every day. When I'm bored, I find a few models or female stars and start a life like throwing parties every day. I always feel that this kind of thing seems to be getting more and more boring, especially thinking about when I was with Sue Che and Steve. Whether it's bickering or boldly guessing about other things, it seems to be more interesting than finding a large group of beautiful models and beauties to hold a party. Add Peepo. All right. He glanced at what was written on the card in his hand. He looked at the reporters with burning eyes under the stands. Tony Stark was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly threw away the card in his hand. Okay. Actually, I am Iron Man. Listening to Tony Stark not even having foreplay, he directly admitted that he is Iron Man. Those below were not originally hopeful. Even going back to write the manuscript, those reporters who were going to expose the truth exploded in an instant. Everyone got up and frantically surrounded Tony Stark. Regardless of what was behind Tony Stark, those security personnel came and surrounded him. Mr. Stark, do you admit that you are Iron Man? How did you develop the Iron Man? It is a new type of weapon, and is it ready for sale? Mr. Stark, was the man in that shield last night really Captain Steve Rogers who had disappeared for 70 years? Stark, why is Silver Moon Knight and Captain America together? What is Silver Moon Knight's true identity? Are you friends? Can you reveal the true identity of the Silver Moon Knight? And why did Captain America appear 70 years later? Watching the reporters swarming to ask questions, the entire press conference site was in chaos. New Mexico. Inside the SHILD temporary residence. Damn it, I knew he wasn't going to say what he had prepared. Watching Tony Stark actually admit that he is after Iron Man Nick Fury through the phone directly on the table. Nick, what did you call me over from the Eagle's Nest? It wasn't just to show me the news. With her legs resting on the table, a woman with a very beautiful appearance and a very hot figure painted red nail polish on her fingers, while smiling at Nick Fury. You should know that there are still a large number of rookies waiting for training in the Eagle's Nest. Even Nick Fury has to admit it. The woman in front of her is of the top class no matter in terms of appearance or figure. Not to mention that there is a strong charm in every gesture. It's like the female hormones walking in the world. Few men can resist such amorous feelings. Definitely, there are exceptions. Like, Nick Fury doesn't have any feelings for her. After all, the nickname of this woman in front of her. But the Medusa Doris who competes with Black Widow Natasha Romanoff. Let's put it this way, there are many people kneeling under her pomegranate skirt, whether they are men or women. But without exception, the ending of these people. Originally, I wanted to name her Poisonous Scorpion, but she didn't agree. Hold on. Listening to Medusa Doris' inquiry, Nick Fury signaled her to wait for a while. After a while, Phil Coulson knocked on the door and walked in. Phil Coulson walked in and just wanted to report the results of his investigation to Nick Fury. But in the next second, he saw the woman who turned her head to look at herself, with a charming woman between her brows. He immediately shut his mouth tightly. At the same time, the body subconsciously moved to the side. It seemed that he really didn't want to have anything to do with this extraordinarily enchanting woman in front of him. Well, Phil Coulson knows this guy. Hey, isn't this the nice guy Phil Coulson? Why did he finally meet him? And he treats me like this? Oh, it's really sad. Gently blowing on her fingers that had just finished applying nail polish, Doris raised her eyebrows and glanced at Phil Coulson. Just a coquettish look in his eyes made Phil Coulson subconsciously move his body again. Doris! The sound prevented Doris from continuing to tease Phil Coulson's movements and expressions. Nick Fury waved to Phil Coulson. Soon, Phil Coulson posted a photo and attached a detailed file of what happened to the man in the photo in the past few days. Sure, more than 70%, sir. This man named Thor in the hospital has always claimed to be a prince from Asgard, but those nurses only think that he has mental problems. Ask for Flowers flip through the information and take a look. Nick Fury took a look at the photo, this strong and handsome blonde man, then handed the photo and the attached investigation file to Medusa Doris. Doris, this time your target is the person in the photo. Pointing to the photo, Nick Fury said seriously, you shouldn't have any problem taking him down. Oh. After it feels like the nails are almost dry, Doris then picked up the photo of Thor in hospital gown from the table. Looking at the photo, Thor's face. The corner of Di Lisi's mouth raised slightly. He is really a handsome guy, Nick. I like this breed. Well, it's about breed, not about looks, temperament, and figure. Ahem. He coughed and cleared his throat slightly. Nick Fury said seriously to the interested Doris, Doris, be gentle. This person is very important to the future of our shield. I hope you can make him mature and even become attached to the earth, instead of requiring you to indulge and turn it into pieces. Listening to Nick Fury re-announce his mission, Di Lisi took a look at the file and then put the photo on the table. Huh? You said he is a handsome guy from an alien? That seems more interesting. Understood. If it's okay, I'll go first. After speaking, Doris stood up and gave Phil Coulson a wink. Then he turned and left with a silver bell-like laugh. Wait until Doris leaves. Phil Coulson glanced after her. Then he softly said to Nick Fury, Sir, if this person named Thor you mentioned is very important to our shield, so sending Medusa, wasn't that cruel to a man called Thor? Cruel? Hearing some hesitation from Phil Coulson, Nick Fury's expression was as serious as ever. How can a person grow up quickly without going through some things? But after saying this, Nick Fury also had a rare expression, showing a trace of hesitation. You should pay more attention to this matter, and tell Doris not to go too far. Clear. Nodding seriously, Phil Coulson understood what the director meant. Geez, poor Thor. Thinking of Doris' methods, Phil Coulson sympathized with this guy named Thor, who claimed to be the Prince of Asgard. I hope, don't put on some mental illness. Chapter 81 Tony. Sue, don't think I won't find a lawyer, because you're handsome. You came here so soon. Aren't you afraid to lure those reporters? Looking at Tony Stark swaggeringly sitting in front of him, Suche knocked on the coffee cup and said, You know, you just admitted to those reporters that you are Iron Man. Hearing what Suche said, Tony Stark shrugged his shoulders and said, Come on, buddy, isn't it a matter of time before your identity is exposed? And it's not something to be ashamed of, and we're not Bruce Wayne in the comics. Speaking of this, Tony Stark pointed outside. Don't worry, those reporters have already gone back to write their manuscripts. Even if someone wants to secretly photograph it and sell it to a newspaper, you still have to trust the financial resources of the great Tony Stark, okay? Let's put it this way, as long as I don't want to, then no one can send the photo of the three of us together. 107. Besides, I know that the two of you want to live the lives of the common people for the time being, so I've already contacted Peepo with some media. Perhaps it won't be long before many media or radio stations will know about Tony Stark's shares. Seeing Tony's slightly outstretched expression, Steve on the side smiled but didn't say anything. Instead, Suche joked to Tony, Wow, you really deserve to be Tony Stark, who is so rich. But buddy, You are so rich, so can you pay for the coffee that skipped twice? What order escape? What coffee? Hearing Suche's words, Tony Stark blinked. Then he looked at Suche innocently and said, "Don't be kidding, buddy. I am the greatest genius, philanthropist, and playboy of this century. You are still a dignified billionaire. How can you do such a shameful thing as skipping orders? Anyway, you're making a false accusation. I think it's necessary for my lawyer to talk to you. Don't think I won't find a lawyer, because you're handsome." Looking at Tony Stark, who blinked his innocent eyes and started to play a rascal, Suche gave him a middle finger without any hesitation. Steve listened to the two of them bickering. It was the first time I felt so happy after recovering from the freeze. "Tony, the cost of one dispatch by your lawyer is enough to cover your coffee money for a year." "Then definitely. After all, Yonge is the top lawyer team in the United States." Spreading his hands, Tony Stark knocked on the coffee cup. "But you can't say that some money should be spent and some money should be saved. Anyway, I will never admit that I drank 2 cups of coffee and didn't pay the bill." As he spoke, Tony Stark looked at Suche and raised his eyebrows triumphantly. "Unless you can prove something, monitoring is covered in the store 24 hours a day." Pointing to the monitor on the corner, Suche said to Tony, "Definitely. Maybe you can cut open your stomach with a knife to prove that you really drank 2 cups of coffee and paid twice." "You think I'm stupid? It hurts to have my stomach cut open." Who would cut open his stomach to prove that he really paid for 2 cups of coffee? With a blank look at Suche, Tony Stark couldn't believe that someone would slit his belly open with a knife because of this incident. "Does it hurt to think about it?" "Yeah, but you just feel a stomachache when you cut your stomach. But if you don't pay the bill, Selena, the manager of my Teowalan cafe, will feel distressed. After all, as the store manager, she has an extra commission besides her salary." Hearing what Suche said, Tony Stark raised his hand to greet Selena. "Selena, please give me a latte." Facing the reasonable request of the guests, Selena walked over with a cup of latte in a short while. "Hey, beautiful girl, here's a tip for your extra hard work." "Thank you." He handed the $500 to Selena casually. Tony Stark turned his head to Suche and said, "So, I will never admit that I skipped orders. By the way, are there any activities in the afternoon? Why don't we continue to discuss about Obadiah Stan? I always feel like this thing is not over yet." Facing the fact that Tony gave Selena a tip of $500, Suche naturally has no opinion. But listening to Tony say he wants to continue talking about Obadiah Stein, Suche put down his coffee cup and said, "Steve and I are going to go fishing this afternoon. Do you want to participate? Is this an invitation?" "Well, since you've already sent out the invitation, then the great Tony Stark has decided to reluctantly accept your invitation because you used the identity of the Silver Moon Knight to help me last night." Speaking of fishing, Tony Stark sat up straight and looked at the two people. "But how boring is Commons fishing?" "Well, in a moment I'll have Happy get my yacht ready for a game of sea fishing." 11. Maybe we can catch some uncommon seafood. Definitely, if I feel that simply going fishing is boring, then I can also find some famous models and actresses to come over. Why, well. Hearing Tony's words, Steve really wanted to tell him that the fun of fishing is not what you catch. It's not about those models and actresses that Tony said. Rather, it depends on who was fishing originally and who the friends were fishing with. But looking at the excited Tony, it was obvious that he wanted to join his and Sue's group. After thinking about it, Steve decided to go fishing a few times before telling him about it. After all, he is Howard's son, and now he wants to reform his evil ways, which is a good thing, right? Turning his head to look at Suche, Steve thought that Tony wanted to join the group of the two. Suche also has to make a decision whether to choose to accept, seeing that Tony's tone is very sincere, but he has to pretend to be indifferent. Suche thought for a while, and then he didn't refuse. Sea fishing? It's fine if you go out to sea for some sea fishing. Maybe, boom! Before Suche could finish speaking, there was a violent explosion sound from the opposite side, not far away. The mighty 5.0 explosion didn't just ring out in the lobby on the first floor of the Stark Industrial Building. The airwaves set off by the explosion even affected the people on the street. Listen to the screams of terror and people running around in the street. And looking at where the explosion happened, almost all 3 of them got up subconsciously. Damn it, I knew it wasn't over. While speaking, he looked at the 2 people who had already left quickly and ran towards the scene of the incident. Tony Stark didn't care about the coffee he hadn't taken a sip just now, and ran directly towards the Stark Industrial Building opposite him. At the same time, the mood sank to the bottom. In broad daylight, dare to drop a bomb on the first floor of the Stark Industrial Building. Damn it. What kind of crazy person would do it? Chapter 82. Poor Thor is confused because of this woman. First floor of the Stark Industrial Building. Looking at the broken glass all over the floor and two security guards bleeding from their foreheads. Suche helped to evacuate people around, so as not to cause confusion and cause any accidents. Steve, on the other hand, does a quick check to see if there are any other dangers on the scene. Happy, how many people are injured? Has an ambulance been called? Tony Stark, who ran back after him, looked at the panic-stricken hall and the traces left by the explosion. Then he asked Happy, who was walking toward him in a hurry. Tony Stark's first question was not what happened, nor is it responsible for what the security department is doing or why there are bombings here. Instead, ask Happy if anyone is injured and call an ambulance or something. This relieved Steve Rogers, who had just inspected the scene. After all, when a person faces a disaster or an emergency, the subconscious is more concerned about the problem, the more it can prove the nature of a person. It was like after hearing the explosion, many people subconsciously avoided it. Only myself and Suche ran to the scene almost immediately. Who doesn't want their friends to be the same as themselves, or people with similar interests? Just look at the question that Tony directly asked this person named Happy the most. Steve felt that if something happened to him in the future, perhaps Tony could also be trusted. If it was his time, Tony might be like himself. Be the one to let your teammates step on their shoulders to escape, or to climb over the barbed wire under the rain of bullets. Suche didn't know what Steve was thinking after evacuating those who fled in panic from the Stark Industrial Building. He walked over to Steve and asked, "How is it?" It was clearly a small bomb, but there were no other explosives around. Hearing Suche's question, Steve said something softly. After Tony on the side asked Happy again, he came over to the two of them and said, "I just asked, but I don't know how that bomb came about. I'm afraid I have to adjust the monitoring to find out. It's a good thing no one died because of this damn bomb. On the contrary, two unlucky ones had their heads scratched by the glass shattered by the bomb, and they have already called an ambulance." Having said that, Tony Stark looked at the broken glass and the traces left by the bomb explosion. Then he asked Steve, "Steve, you are a professional in this area. What do you think?" Looking around, Steve said seriously to Tony Stark, "Obviously, this is a small-scale explosion, and the purpose is not to assassinate someone or to blow up the building. After all, if these two goals are used, then the explosion range will not be so low. Should be a warning." Listening to Steve's words, Suche crossed his arms and said to Tony, "Rather than wanting to blow up the Stark Industrial Building, it's more like a warning to you or to others. Tony, when you investigated Obadiah Stein's private channel recently, did you find out something incredible? Otherwise, they wouldn't take such a big risk to send you a controllable bomb." Hear Suche and Steve say that. Tony Stark hesitated for a moment, then nodded lightly. "Through my investigation of Obadiah Stein's private channel, I found an anonymous account. Obadiah Stein remits as little as 10 million to this account every year, and as many as tens of millions. And this has been happening for about 5 years in a row. That's why in the coffee shop, I said with certainty that there are other forces behind Obadiah Stan. It's just that I didn't expect it to be less than a day since I investigated that account through some channels. I just received this gift. It is obvious that this is the owner of that account, or that the power does not want me to continue the investigation." Speaking of this, the cynical smile on Tony Stark's face disappeared. It was replaced by an expression called perseverance. Look at Tony Stark's expression. Suche knew that this gift made Tony serious. Glancing outside, because the danger disappeared at this moment, many people gathered far away to watch the excitement. Some even took out their phones to take pictures. Suche raised his hand and patted Tony's shoulder. "You deal with the scene first. I'm afraid the media and police cars will come over later. After the on-site processing is over, the three of us will discuss this matter carefully." Listening to Suche's words, an eye Stark nodded. He knew that when the police car arrived, he would definitely make a record or something. But Suche and Steve don't want to reveal their identities yet. So he nodded. Steve on the side also smiled and patted Tony Stark on the shoulder. Very good. At least judging from Suche's words just now. He's willing to accept Tony as part of their group. Suche and Steve had just left from the side entrance of the Stark Industrial Building. A siren sounded. It didn't even take 7 minutes before and after. Even faster than the battle against Obadiah Stan last night. At the same time, in a hospital in New Mexico, Thor, who was tied to the bed with restraints, stared blankly at the ceiling of the hospital. Who would have thought? Myself, the Prince of Asgard from God's realm, is the first in line heir to the throne. The god of thunder that terrifies the enemy from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, he was tied to the bed by several strips of cloth and could not move. Even not long ago, when I wanted to break out, I was stunned by those guys with a small thing. The King of Gods is above. Damn it, I have lived for more than 1,500 years. When did I receive such treatment? The majestic god of thunder would be stunned by such a small thing. God, it's unimaginable. Am I, Thor Odinson, shameless? If this matter, let Loki know. I'm afraid he will laugh at himself for the rest of his life. If the enemy's killed by him, if they know that they have fallen on a small gadget like electric current. 960, I'm afraid they will laugh and climb out of the underworld. No, I can't stay here any longer. You have to find a way to escape. Gotta find a way to find my own hammer. The father exiled himself to the earth and even deprived himself of his divine power to become a common. The feeling of losing power is really uncomfortable. Just restore your divine power as soon as possible. Just when Thor was still thinking and was still trying to break free from the restraints, the door of the ward was pushed open, and then a woman in white nurse's clothes walked in. Damn it, I'm the great god of thunder. I warn you, don't use that gadget to shock me again, otherwise I will definitely lose my face. The threatening words were not finished yet, when Thor raised his head to look at the nurse. The sound gradually weakened until it finally disappeared. Odin testified, for more than 1,500 years, Thor thought that he had never seen a beautiful, beautiful woman with a good figure. I don't know why, when I watched the woman in front of me walk towards me, Thor suddenly felt like the words he knew to describe beautiful women. At this moment, they all disappeared. Watching her walk towards him step by step, Thor felt his heart beat faster with each step. The kind of high-heeled shoes stepped on the floor, making a crisp sound of gada gada. It's like a heavy hammer hitting my heart again and again. This feeling, Thor found as if he had never experienced it before. Chapter 83, 10th Diary, Nema, Cheating. The Stark Industrial Building was planted with a bomb, which has never happened in my world. In my world, Tony has experienced being kidnapped, severe anxiety, and even the villa being bombed. However, the bombing of the lobby on the first floor of the Stark Industrial Building has never happened. Sure enough, time is such a thing. A small mistake will often bring unexpected consequences. However, it is obvious that this bomb is just a small warning. They want Tony to know, and if the investigation continues, the result will not be as simple as the bomb police deployment definitely. They would never dare to attack Tony directly. Howard Stark is Tony's father, and this is Tony's biggest talisman. They could plan to kill Howard Stark and his wife back then, but now they dare not do anything to Tony. Who told Tony that once his life was in danger, then Nick Fury would definitely continue to investigate with all his strength. They also know that the result of this is that Tony died and their identities were exposed. Then Nick Fury attacked them, followed by their decades-long plan to become the world's dominator, which fell short. This kind of result is something they are unwilling to accept, and they absolutely cannot accept it. So, compared to that plan, the life and death of a Tony Stark is not important. As long as that plan is successful, then under their knowledge, no one in this world can stop them. Whether it is the rebels or those who threaten their future, they will all be wiped out immediately. Only this time, they were naive. The more threatening they were, the more Tony would not stop investigating. So in the future, I'm afraid there will be some wonderful stories between Tony and them. I really hope to see a wonderful scene that is different from my world. However, my only concern is whether Nick Fury sent someone to approach Tony, and then found out that Tony has been poisoned by palladium at this moment. This is the key to whether Tony can survive. New Mexico. Looking at the updated content, in the Black Gold Diary? Nick Fury nodded slightly. In fact, not since Obadiah Stine was captured by the FBI. After Pepper Potts became the new CEO of Stark Industries, when she chose Tony's life assistant, he has already sent a female detective to apply for the job and is preparing to become Tony Stark's assistant. Even just in case, he sent a total of 7 applicants. The result is very good. An agent of SHIELD has been successfully applied. Became Tony Stark's life assistant. Only. Even so, and I've already passed the previous diaries. Learn about Tony Stark's palladium poisoning ahead of time. But what about after? Can you write more details in the diary? For example, how can I help Tony Stark solve the problem of palladium poisoning? The scientific researchers of SHIELD and the attending physicians of various departments have inquired about it themselves. But they can't do anything about things like palladium poisoning. It can only be suppressed in the short term, but cannot fundamentally solve this problem. So, how did the self in the parallel world help Tony Stark solve this problem? Damn, can't you write more clearly in the diary? Shaking his head a little annoyed, Nick Fury was just about to continue watching. Then he suddenly raised his head and forcibly looked away from the Black Gold Diary. Something is wrong. My current state of mind is very wrong. Since when did you actually start to rely on the answers given by others? He looked at the Black Gold Diary in his hand. Nick Fury thought about getting the Black Gold Diary again, after reading the first diary. Some of the decisions you make. Only then did Nick Fury realize that he seemed to be relying too much on what was written in this diary. Yes, what is written in this diary about the future. It really allows you to prepare yourself for many things in advance, including knowing that Tony Stark was kidnapped, and that he himself would escape and come back to become Iron Man. And Captain America Steve Rogers was still alive, and then he was found and successfully revived from the ice. There's even the hammer that fell from the sky, and Thor who made Medusa approach. Unknowingly, my own thoughts, all my plans, it seems that they're all being influenced by this diary. They are all using this diary to know what will happen in the future in advance, and then make judgments and decisions. This is wrong, at least for myself, absolutely not. As the bureau chief of SHIELD, as the king of agents. If you don't have your own judgment, but absolutely trust the content written in the diary. So, what is the difference between me and other SHIELD members? Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and hold your breath. Immediately, thoughts began to turn rapidly. If I were my normal self, I would die shortly after hearing that Tony Stark was poisoned with palladium. So, what would you do? Thinking about it now, my first thought just now was to pin my hopes on the diary. I hope that Su-Che will write down the answer of how he saved Tony in the diary. Just a simple comparison, Nick Fury began to wake up. Before I knew it, I seemed to have really changed. No, although with this Black Gold Diary, I can indeed save a lot of effort. There are also preventive plans for the future. But mere fuck, I am Nick Fury, the director of the Dignified Shield. How can I let the Black Gold Diary or other people's thinking lead me by the nose? Thinking of this, Nick Fury let out the breath he had just held back. The eyes also regained their clarity. That's right, I can use the Black Gold Diary to know in advance what will happen in the future. Then on this basis, under this convenient condition, protect against future dangers. But that's just a more convenient condition, not a factor in your own decision-making. Therefore, you must keep your independent thinking free from interference. At the same time, we have to do more preparations. Don't let Black Gold Diary make any decisions for you. Otherwise, how can I be worthy of my current status? After suddenly clearing his mind, the calmness in Nick Fury's eyes returned. After picking up the diary again, Nick Fury continued watching. Only this time, Nick Fury returned to the mentality he had when he first got the diary. Well, the contents recorded in the diary can be believed. I can use this convenience to prevent many things. However, this Black Gold Diary cannot be overly relied on. Don't let it drag you from Nick Fury to another Nick Fury. In the apartment, looking at the system, Nick Fury's trust value had already started to fluctuate, ready to start moving towards the 80 mark. But in the next second, the originally rising trust value suddenly dropped back. After becoming 73% of the original again, it remained motionless. Seeing this scene, Suche was speechless for a while. What's the situation? What the hell is Nick Fury doing? Although according to the system, the previous trust value generated by the previous diary is locked. On this basis, the diary holder will fluctuate the trust value according to the content of the latest diary. Unless it is subversive content, the trust value of the diary holder will increase steadily or remain unchanged. The mission value will not be locked again until the latest diary is read. That is to say, during the period of reading the diary, the trust value generated by the diary holder for the previous diary has been locked. Take Nick Fury, for example. After the last diary, his trust value was 73%. Well, as long as the new diary written by Suche, by Wong, is not too subversive, then the 73% trust value remains unchanged. When Nick Fury was reading the latest diary entry, the trust value will fluctuate on the basis of 73%. But just now, Nick Fury's trust value is obviously about to reach 80%, and the trust value is still rising in a straight line. Suche predicts that it is very likely that after this diary is over, Nick Fury's trust value will reach 90%. But no one knows what happened to Nick Fury when he was reading his diary. In the blink of an eye, the trust value actually dropped back to 73%. Then start to stay still. It's like a cooked duck that's about to be brought to the table. As a result, the duck flew straight away as soon as it was placed on the plate. Pit father. If Nick Fury appeared in front of Suche right now, then Suche will definitely open Nick Fury's head and take a look at his unique brain circuit. How is it so difficult to gain his trust value? It looks like you can brush to 90 and you can get a new calendar. But it fell back after a swipe. TSK. It really is. As expected of Nick Fury. Mayor Falk. Chapter 84. Let Captain America run away with Mjolnir. Asgard. Mother, is the royal father still awake? Looking at the father lying in the gold defense mechanism, his eyes are closed and he is falling into a deep sleep at this moment. It was the first time that Loki discovered that it turned out that his father, the famous God King Odin, who shocked the Nine Realms. There is such a weak side, especially when he fell into a deep sleep. It was the first time that Loki saw clearly at close range. Father is already so old. Although in Legendary, the god Wong Yu's power is stronger when he is old. But, looking at the weak father at the moment, Loki held the eternal spear tightly in his right hand, as if he had strengthened his determination. Relax, Loki. He glanced at Odin, who was in a deep sleep. Frigga smiled gently at Loki. Although Thor was exiled by your father. But with you in Asgard during this time, your father and I feel very at ease. Let him take a good rest for a while. Since he took the throne, he has never had a real rest. Listening to his mother's gentle words, he watched his father, Odin, weakly in a deep sleep. Loki stared at him for a long time, then whispered to Frigga, Mother, no matter what happens, I will always stand by Asgard's side. What you up to? Hearing Loki say this, as Frigga, who raised him since he was a child and taught him magic himself. Naturally, he knew his son's character very well. So after hearing what 363 Loki said, he unconsciously felt a little worried. Don't worry, Mother. I'm just sighing with emotion. Smiling at his mother, Loki said again, Then, I'll deal with things first, Mother. Go, Loki, although I don't know what you are going to do, but Mother believes in you. Seeing Loki's reluctance to speak, Frigg knew that she would never come out either. So he smiled and nodded. Loki would never do such a thing as sorry for Asgard. Frigga is absolutely sure of this. But even she still couldn't figure out what Loki had to do to kill his father for Asgard. It was Ice Titan Lauf who killed, not Odin. Watching Loki leave, he turned his head to look at his sleeping husband again. Frigga is a little worried about her eldest son at the moment. I don't know how Thor is doing on Earth. Gently raising a hand, the floating light flickered. Soon, the black gold diary appeared in Frigg's palm. Perhaps people who are also in Midgard, through the owner of the diary, Suche, know about Thor's life at the moment. But there shouldn't be any danger to his life. Otherwise, Heldam would have come to notify him long ago. Opening the diary, looking at the 10th diary that has been updated, Queen Frigga sat there and read it. 2 days ago, Natasha Romanoff invited me to take Wanda and Pietro to the playground. This is the first time Wanda and Pietro have visited the playground since their parents passed away. It can be seen that Wanda and Pietro are having a good time. When playing together, Wanda always hugs my arm intentionally or unintentionally and is very intimate. I don't know if this is the influence of the parallel world, but she is very close to me. Natasha Romanoff and I didn't ride the merry-go-round during Wanda and Pietro's ride. Natasha Romanoff told me that a hammer fell from the sky over there in New Mexico, and even Nick Fury went through it. I was not surprised at all when I heard the news. Even Steve was able to thaw out of the freeze and recover early. So why is it surprising that Thor was exiled early? I'm no longer surprised by what happened in this world ahead of time. Perhaps it is the impact of the career of the Avengers for more than 10 years. Now many things have no way to surprise and shock me. I don't know if Thor has met Jane Foster now. It should be. After all, Jane is his future girlfriend and also one of the people who is eligible to pick up Mjolnir in the future definitely. The reason why she can afford Mjolnir is because even the broken Mjolnir was entrusted by Thor, hoping to protect her. Well, what if Steve stood with Jane Foster and Thor and summoned Mjolnir at the same time? Then who will the hammer fly to? I really want to see it if I have a chance. After all, whoever is qualified to pick up Mjolnir will gain the power of the Thunder God. Looking at the records in the Black Gold Diary, Zhao is also slightly surprised. She knows that Thor was able to pick up Mjolnir, initially because of Godhood's influence. Later, Mjolnir became Thor's natal artifact. So, is there anyone else who can afford Mjolnir? Or the weaklings of the Constitution? Look at Jane Foster and Steve's name. Frigga silently wrote it down in her heart. Well, my son was exiled to the earth, and he actually found a girlfriend. This is really good news. But what happened to the broken Mjolnir? Mjolnir actually shatters? As for the Earthlings who picked up Mjolnir, fortunately, Jane Foster said that it was written clearly in the Black Gold Diary. She can afford Mjolnir because of Thor's entrustment to Mjolnir, hoping that it will protect Jane Foster. So what about this, Steve? Perhaps it was because her husband once said to Mjolnir when Thor was exiled. But whoever is recognized by it and is qualified to lift it will gain the power of the God of Thunder. If it is like this, then this man named Steve must be a hero of high character and respect. Earth. Jane Foster, the woman who hit Thor with the car, is his future girlfriend? And then Steve can pick up this Thunder Hammer too? Look at the content written in the Black Gold Diary. Nick Fury is going to put the Jane Foster matter on hold for a while. At the same time, I have to admit, seeing when Steve can pick up this hammer and gain the power of the Thunder God, he was really moved. Although, I have sent Medusa Doris to make Thor mature as soon as possible. And no, too, the 1500-year-old prince from Asgard. It is one of the superheroes of the future Earth. However, a prince from an alien planet whose personality is not yet mature. Compared with a legendary hero who knows the bottom line and originally has the highest quality, then it's up to you to choose who will be the Earth superhero. If you were an ordinary person, you probably wouldn't even have to think about it. Definitely Steve Rogers. However, Nick Fury is thinking, or a deeper worry is, if Steve picks up Mjolnir, he gains the power of the mighty Thunder God. So will this get Asgard's attention, and will Earth and Asgard be at war? This is what he considered first, but probably not. After all, Suche wrote it in the Black Gold Diary. Steve will be able to pick up the Mjolnir thing in the future. So, since Steve picked it up in the future, Asgard probably wouldn't care too much. At least, while Thor was stripped of his powers and still exiled on Earth. At worst, let Steve try it, and then put it back after picking it up. And according to the Black Gold Diary, Thor was deprived of his divine power and exiled to the Earth. So before his divine power is restored, can Steve borrow Mjolnir temporarily when performing tasks? Thinking of this, Nick Fury took out his mobile phone and dialed Natasha Romanoff's number. Chapter 85, Surprised by Wanda. She is really good at it early morning. In the next week, I will send you to and from school every day, as well as your food and accommodation for this week. Although I know that there is nothing wrong with the two of you at home, but after all, there are things like breakfast, dinner, and safety. So during this period of time you live where I am, don't worry, I have enough rooms. Looking at Wanda and the co-pilot and her support in the military, Suche started the car. And while driving towards the direction of the two people's school, he said with a smile. Natasha Romanoff should tell you about this matter. Well, Natasha Romanoff told us this morning at breakfast. Seeing Sue Che, who was driving seriously, Wanda turned her head to look at the side face that can be called the ceiling of beauty and smiled. So, Sue, I will trouble you this week. How could be? Listening to Wanda's slightly sweet voice, Sue Che smiled and said, Natasha Romanoff and I are friends, so naturally there won't be any trouble. And she went on a mission. I helped take care of you. You should also. Listening to Sue Che's answer, Wanda blinked her beautiful eyes, but did not speak. For Natasha Romanoff's sake? Duplicity man, sooner or later, you will be my girl. Sitting in the back row, Pietro, who has never spoken a word, looks out the window at the scene of the car, reversing rapidly. The fist can't help but be clenched tightly. God! Wanda actually learned to speak with her throat closed. This is terrible, okay? Actually learned to pinch his throat and make a sweet sound? Is this still the Wanda I know? Send Wanda and Pietro to the campus gate all the way. Wanda turned her head and motioned for Pietro to get out of the car and wait for her. Wait until Pietro gets out of the car. Wanda looked at Sue Che and said very seriously, So, for the next week, Pietro and I will bother you. By the way, in order to thank you for taking care of me this week, I have a gift I want to give you. Looking at Wanda's very serious expression, she has already started looking through her bag as if she was looking for something. Just as Sue Che was about to say no, Wanda said in surprise, Hey, I put it here last night. Why didn't it disappear? Sue, can you come over and help me find it? Hearing Wanda's request, Sue Che leaned closer and looked at the bag in Wanda's hand. Just as I was about to ask what I was looking for, I was suddenly attacked. In an instant, the cheeks felt a burst of softness. This is a thank you gift. Blushing and giggling, he opened the car door, then waved to Sue Che. Pietro and I will wait for you after school in the afternoon. After speaking, Wang Yin closed the car door and walked into the campus with some doubtful support. On campus, Wanda, just now. What happened just now? Turning her head to look at Pietro, Wanda smiled very freely and said, Pietro, don't you think it's suitable for me and Sue to be together? And according to the age of this world, we are only 5 years apart, which is not very big. Besides, isn't it normal for girls to take the initiative? If you like it, then you should be bold. Otherwise, with Sue's good looks and temperament, maybe one day he will be cheaper than other women. Having said that, Wanda raised her finger and pointed Pietro's shoulder. You think I don't know you like Alice in the next class? Pietro, we are not children anymore. So if you meet someone you like, then you should pursue it boldly. Otherwise, shyness will make us miss the people we like. Hearing that before she could ask, Wanda chattered a lot. Pietro scratched his head. In fact, what I wanted to ask just now is, will I really live in Sue Che's house for a week from tonight? Pietro felt that even if it was just himself and Wanda, then I also have the ability to protect Wanda. I looked at Wanda, who seemed to be very happy at the moment, humming the tune. Pietro was a little puzzled. After all, I have no objection to you pursuing the person you like, but what about Natasha Romanoff? What? Hearing Pietro's words, Wanda was a little puzzled and looked at her younger brother with some vigilance. What does this matter have to do with Natasha Romanoff? You mean Sue and Natasha Romanoff are together? When did this happen? Why didn't I know? Looking at Wanda's serious and dangerous eyes, Pietro quickly waved his hand and then asked cautiously, It's not you and Natasha Romanoff. What are you thinking? He raised his hand and knocked Pietro on the head angrily. I treat Natasha Romanoff as my sister. Natasha Romanoff also regards herself as a younger sister. How come to Pietro, the relationship between himself and Tasha is not right? Ask for flowers, oh my God. And when did I give Pietro the illusion that I like women? As a younger brother, how could he guess his sister like this? No. The lesson to be changed will teach him a lesson. Watch Wanda's expression change. Pietro understood in an instant that what he had guessed or even identified before was definitely a misunderstanding. Facing Wanda, who looked a little unfriendly, Pietro immediately pointed to the direction of the classroom, not far away. Wanda, time is running out. Let's go quickly. Listen to Pietro's lousy excuses. Wanda snorted, then walked towards the classroom. Forget it. Give him a face. I won't teach him at school today. But I and Sue have known each other for so long. Even my birthday has passed. Even in the playground, I hugged his arm openly and squarely. How could he have no reaction at all? Come on, I'm Wanda Django Maximov, the wife of your world. Is it true that, as Natasha Romanoff said, he still has concerns? If I don't take the initiative, then it is very likely that there will never be a story between the two people. Never mind. Take the initiative to take the initiative. It is not shameful for a girl to take the initiative to pursue happiness. And I really like him too, not to mention being handsome. It's just the kind of maturity and vicissitudes that are unconsciously exuded, and even a somewhat melancholy temperament plus that sufficient sense of security. That's enough to drive me crazy. Not to mention that every time I go to the coffee shop, when I sit with him, I take care of myself in such a gentlemanly detail. And when he mentioned his previous life, he used it with a very caring feeling. It's really hard to say no to. Come on, Wanda. You can definitely take him down. As for the fact that he already has a Wanda in his heart, it doesn't matter anyway. It's me in the parallel world. I don't care. In the car, well, Steve was taken by Natasha Romanoff, so Sue is going to find Tony Stark. This guy called himself last night and said he had found some new clues, so I hope I can help in the past. Suche also wanted to see what Tony found, but Wanda is really good at it, Chapter 86, it's over. Poor Thor will die of grief. New Mexico in a small town. Yes. Sitting on Thor's lap, Medusa Doris held Thor's cheek. Her tone was like coaxing a child. Money is very important on our Earth. You see, without money we have no place to live and nothing to eat. We can't even drink that glass of beer you like if we don't have money. So, I have to go to work to make money so that our life on Earth will be better in the future. Speaking of this, Doris raised her hand and tapped Thor's nose lightly. Do you know? You dropped that glass in the restaurant yesterday, and I have to pay for it. So, don't allow it next time. Hearing that Doris is as gentle as water, but she has a kind of teaching like the big sister next door, Thor scratched his head in embarrassment. I didn't know that you have to pay for throwing cups on Earth. In our Asgard, the praise of 103 for fine wine is usually in the form of throwing cups. Okay, I know. Gently rubbed Thor's forehead with his forehead, looking at Thor like a child doing something wrong. Doris smiled softly. It's okay. Take your time. I believe you will always know that the Earth is different from the Asgard you mentioned. Looking at Doris, whose eyes are like waves and gentle like water, Thor nodded seriously. Don't worry, I will learn about the Earth as soon as possible. Hey, don't be so serious. Gently nodding on Thor's forehead with pale fingers, Doris winked at Thor playfully. According to what you said, you are more than 1,500 years old. So, this matter will definitely not trouble you. After finishing speaking, Doris glanced at the time. Yeah, I'm going to be late for work soon, so I'm going to work now. Wait for me obediently at home. Even if you feel bored and go out for a walk, you are not allowed to fight with others. And you should pay more attention to safety, okay? Looking at Doris, who is gentle like a big sister for a while, and mischievous for a while like the little sister next door. Thor grins and nods silly. So cute. Gently rubbing Thor's head, Doris got up and went to the entrance to change her shoes while saying, By the way, there's a lunch I prepared for you in the refrigerator. Remember to eat on time. And oh, the fridge is the one thing I told you about last night to open. After speaking, Doris gave Thor a wink, then opened the door and left. Doris, what's wrong? Turning his head slightly, his bright eyes tilted his head to look at Thor with a smile on his face. Is there anything else I forgot to say? Raising his hand and scratching his head, Thor sat on the sofa with some hesitation and said, Do you really want to believe that I am a prince from Asgard? After finishing speaking, Thor also quickly explained, I didn't mean anything else, but when I was in the hospital, everyone didn't believe what I said. And then I definitely believe it. You are my boyfriend as a girlfriend. How can you not believe what your boyfriend says? After finishing speaking, Doris raised her pale jade finger and tapped Thor lightly. Also, remember next time, you have to say you love me instead of asking me this question. Let's go. Waving at Thor, Doris closed the door and left with a silvery laugh. Watching Doris close the door and leave, Thor sat on the couch scratching his head, giggling from time to time. In the car. How about it? Hold on. Sitting in the co-pilot, Doris began to touch up her makeup while looking in the mirror and said to Phil Coulson, "Did you do what I asked you to do? It's almost finished, and now 80% of the entire town is our people. The remaining 20% are also moving away. Before dark, this town can be 100% owned by our own people." Having said that, Phil Coulson looked at Doris seriously and said, "Doris, I prefer you to call me that nickname." "Okay, Medusa, what you are doing now seems to be different from what the director explained, at least from the content document given by the director and your current method." Listening to Phil Coulson's words, Doris closed the makeup mirror in her hand. The winking eyes lightly picked Phil Coulson, and then the red lips parted slightly, but the tone contained a hint of disdain. "Nick understands the feelings of a fart. If he understood feelings, he wouldn't have divorced his wife, Priscilla." Hearing what Medusa Doris said, Phil Coulson was very silent, saying that he could pretend he didn't hear the topic. That is to say, Doris can talk about this matter at will, if it is someone else. Well, other people don't even know that the director was married, or even divorced. Nick's ultimate request is to make Thor mature and full of love for the Earth. So what method to use is naturally up to me. He wrote it. While gesturing to Phil Coulson to drive, Doris said softly, "Even if he lived to be more than 1,500 years old, he is still a man. Last night, I easily made out some of the things he went through in Asgard. 0-inch in general. He is more than 1,500 years old, impulsive and reckless, much like a child who has not grown up yet. There's nothing Nick Fury can do to mature a guy like that. To deal with a man who has experienced vicissitudes, it is best to choose innocence and arouse his desire to protect. To deal with a man with a heart like a child, you must surround him with tenderness and consideration like water." Thor can be regarded as a combination of two mentalities. Definitely more of the latter than the former. Even after fighting for more than 1,500 years, there is still more childishness in his bones. Looking at Phil Coulson, the corners of Doris's lips turned upward. So, using a single method to make him feel the love and the beauty of the Earth is absolutely unworkable. By the way, do you know how to make a man fall in love with a woman with all his heart? Have no idea. Facing Doris' question, Phil Coulson shook his head. "How can you know these things if you are a man? It's very simple. That is to be the muse that he can have, but can't have. Possessed but unable to get. Let him feel love, stimulate his desire for protection and pampering in his heart, and at the same time, give him tenderness and consideration like a sister and a mother. The most important thing is to make him think that this girl, like a delicate white lotus, cannot withstand the wind and rain, and Tion needs him. Without his protection, the girl would be hurt. When he loves to the bottom of his heart and feels that the Earth is very good, let him regretfully lose from this beauty. TSK 2.4 This will definitely be a regret he will remember forever." Speaking of this, Doris snorted softly. "So, now you still think that the so-called small essay written by Nick is reasonable? Don't forget, no matter how childish Thor may be, he's over 1,500 years old. Over 1,500 years old. What kind of beautiful woman has he never seen? Looking alone cannot make him unforgettable." Listening to Doris's red lips parting slightly, she said that it was very irrefutable from the bottom of her heart. Phil Coulson pursed his lips and continued driving. As expected, she was indeed Doris, known as Medusa. She is really good at it. Thinking of the appearance of Thor's final empty joy under the careful design of Medusa Alice, Phil Coulson couldn't help but pray for Thor in his heart. TSK. Poor Thor. Chapter 87 Whoa. Steve isn't going to pick up the hammer and fly away and never come back. Is this the Mjolnir from the Black Gold Diary? Looking at the temporary base, at this moment, only myself, Nick Fury, and Steve Rogers in the pit are left. But outside Mjolnir, where security measures are extremely tight, Natasha Romanoff asked, smiling at Nick Fury, folded her arms. "You should have seen what Sue said in the diary." Nick Fury also crossed his arms when asked by Natasha Romanoff. He said Steve could pick up this Mjolnir and that Jane Foster. "So, I want Steve to come over and give it a try. As for Jane Foster, I've got Phil Coulson to keep an eye on her, and I've placed her not far from where Thor and Doris live. Anyway, Dr. Selvig, who studies celestial bodies, is very interested in the changes in celestial bodies caused by Thor's fall from the sky, so he can use this relationship to end. Who? Hearing Nick Fury's words, Natasha Romanoff turned his head and stared at Nick Fury with some surprise. You arranged Jane Foster to Thor, and whose residence? Doris. Seeing Natasha Romanoff's surprised look, Nick Fury crossed his arms and said, Is there anyone more suitable than her? Watching Nick Fury say the name without changing his expression, Natasha Romanoff turned her head, inexplicably feeling some toothache. Doris, Medusa Doris. Looking at Steve standing in the pit, looking at Mjolnir 20, Natasha Romanoff said seriously, I feel uncomfortable when I hear this name. What she has done is far more evil than me. Even if I'm a colleague in the same department now, I don't want to see her again. But really, if it's her, the prince from Asgard is really poor. I hope you can watch her and tell her not to go too far. After speaking, Natasha Romanoff took a step forward and jumped directly into the pit about half a meter in front of her. Coming in front of Steve, Natasha Romanoff said softly, How about it? Pick it up and try it. There should be no problem. Watching Mjolnir resting on a platform made of mounds of earth, Steve spread his hands at Nada. I always thought that the first task SHIELD issued to me would be to hunt down some heinous criminals, or more difficult or even difficult tasks, for which I have made some preparations. Unexpectedly, the first task is to ask me to pick up a hammer. Speaking of this, Steve laughed. If I had known it was such a simple matter, then I would have brought Sue here too, and it would save him from being bored in the coffee shop by himself. He won't be bored. Hearing what Steve said, Natasha Romanoff walked around Mjolnir in front of her. Then he reached out and took Mjolnir's grip. What's wrong? After watching Natasha Romanoff hold the handle of Thunderhammer, a small subtle change appeared in his expression. Although the expression quickly returned to normal, no one else saw it except himself. But Steve was sure he couldn't be wrong. It's okay, I just think this hammer is really heavy. Letting go of Mjolnir's grip, Natasha Romanoff smiled and said to Steve, Besides, Tony Stark seems to have found something extraordinary. So I'm inviting Sue to investigate with him. And now Sue won't feel bored. Maybe he's working hard with Tony on the investigation. After speaking, Natasha Romanoff took 2 steps back and stretched out her hand to indicate that Steve could try to pick up Mjolnir. Actually, I really want to investigate this matter with Sue and Tony. I think it will definitely be more interesting than trying to pick up this hammer. After speaking, Steve took a deep breath and then took Mjolnir's handle with his hand. Steve, who had already done a lot of work and tried his best. But the moment I touched the Mjolnir grip, I found that it was not as difficult as I imagined. With a little force, Mjolnir loosened instantly. In the next second, the originally clear sky also became cloudy in an instant. Seeing this scene, Natasha Romanoff immediately took 2 steps back. Not far away, Nick Fury's expression also became serious, as Steve slowly picks up Mjolnir. In an instant, thunderbolts surging above the sky began to shine among the dark clouds. Even Steve's body began to flicker with dazzling lightning light. Boom! As Steve took the handle of the Thunderhammer, he lifted it high. A powerful thunderbolt was directly connected to the hammer. Boom! Crack! In an instant, the wind was surging and the thunder was rushing. Thousands of thunderbolts exploded in front of Natasha Romanoff and Nick Fury like the Doomsday. Seeing this scene, Natasha Romanoff's eyes flashed an inexplicable meaning. Instead, Nick Fury instantly jumped into the pit in front of him, came to Natasha Romanoff, and said to Steve, Steve, how do you feel now? A wonderful feeling. At this moment, Steve, who was constantly flashing with lightning all over his body, faced the questioning of Chuck Fury. After carefully feeling the changes in the body, he laughed. I feel full of strength all over my body, just like when the super soldier serum injection was successful. Open the other hand, watching the dazzling electric current pop out of the palm. Steve turned his head and said, And I can control this power as I like, and even summon the power of thunder for my use. Saying that, Steve held Mjolnir and held Mjolnir's rope and spun rapidly. And then the whole person flew into the air. Wow, another person can fly. Covering his eyebrows and watching Steve take to the sky, Natasha Romanoff sighed at Nick Fury. He won't pick up the hammer and fly away and never come back. Will this put the Earth and Asgard in war? But seriously, if only this hammer wasn't that Thor's, then Steve would have a wave of epic buffs. The strength of the Avengers alliance in the future will also increase a lot. Hearing Natasha Romanoff's joke, Nick Fury gave a rare smile but didn't speak. Even Natasha Romanoff couldn't guess what Nick Fury was thinking at the moment. However, Nick Fury's self 860 light was on Steve as he descended through the air. But I didn't notice that Natasha Romanoff, who had the same happy and envious expression on the side, but quietly put the other hand behind his back. Just what it feels like to hold the Mjolnir grip. Perhaps only Natasha Romanoff knows. Boom! Landing from the air to the ground, Steve swung the hammer lightly and then put the hammer back to its original place without any hesitation. When I first picked up this hammer, I really felt extraordinary power. However, this power does not cause people to gradually lose their power, just like the super soldier serum back then. While speaking, Steve walked in front of the two people. You should know that the super soldier serum developed by Dr. Erskine back then will not only give a person great strength, it will magnify the good intentions and evil thoughts in a person's heart. Like me and Red Skull John Schmidt, this hammer gives me the same feeling at most. It just has a little more fearlessness. Hearing what Steve said, Nick Fury and Natasha Romanoff looked at each other. Fine, sorry for your trouble, Steve. This is nothing. Spreading his hands towards Nick Fury, Steve glanced at the Mjolnir. But I feel that this hammer doesn't belong to me, or it's not waiting for me, even if I can pick it up. And while it would give me a lot of power, I prefer my shield by comparison. Chapter 88 Suche. When you come in, you just shoot a shuttle. Is this the common company? Hey, Thor? Is that really you? Looking at the cloudy sky not far away, lightning and thunder, it seems that there is a scene of heavy rain. Jane Foster came out of the room, just about to pick up the instrument to see if it was because of the star a few days ago. As a result, Thor was standing there with a serious expression on his face. After seeing Thor, Jane Foster's expression was full of surprise. I didn't expect to see you here. A few days ago, when I went to the hospital to see you, I heard that you had been discharged from the hospital. Hearing a surprise sound coming from his ear, Thor subconsciously looked to the side. At this moment, Jane Foster was happily waving to him and walked towards him. Hello! Recalling the manners Doris taught him, Thor looked at Jane Foster and nodded in greeting. It's a coincidence indeed. Is this your house? Seeing that it was very close to the place where my family lived now, Jane Foster asked curiously. Originally, I came to New Mexico to detect celestial bodies, and I was supposed to live in the RV with Daisy. But I don't know from whom Dr. Selvig took over the house standing in the small town. This is simply too convenient. It's just that Dr. Selvig doesn't know what to do these days and hasn't shown up for several days. This is my girlfriend's house. Listening to Jane Foster's surprise and curious inquiry, Thor replied with a smile. Just think of that gentle, beautiful, kind, naughty Doris who is willing to trust her. There was an involuntary smile on Thor's face. It would be a very bad thing to say that I was deprived of my divine power by my father and exiled to the earth to lose my power and become a common. Then her appearance is the only ray of light under this gloomy sky. So to speak, in Thor's view, all my descriptions of her about all the beautiful adjectives are not enough to express 1/10,000th of her beauty. I am really very, very lucky to be able to meet her in the vast 9 realms. You know, during these 1,500 years, I have seen many women, even experienced some women, but there has never been any woman who can be so tolerant and gentle towards herself like Doris. Really makes people crazy. Your girlfriend? Listening to Thor's words, Jane Foster subconsciously frowned. Inexplicably, there was a slight sense of loss in my heart. She also didn't understand why she was so disappointed when she heard the Thor in front of her say that he had a girlfriend. After all, I've only seen him a few times, and every time, it seems that some misunderstanding happened. By the way, Jane, do you know where that is? Pointing to the direction where the thunder was shining and the dark clouds were densely covered not far away, Thor asked with a serious expression. He looked in the direction of Thor's finger. Jane Foster said, "It should be a desolate and uninhabited place, and I seem to have heard Dr. Selvig say that when the celestial bodies change, there seems to be a hammer that fell from the sky and was blocked by a mysterious department. Oh, Dr. Selvig told me about the hammer that fell from the sky before he left. He also heard from that mysterious department. A hammer that fell from the sky. Thor's eyes lit up when Jane Foster mentioned the hammer. That's my Mjolnir. That's my Mjolnir. Excitedly clenched his fist and waved his hand. Thor looked at Jane Foster and said seriously, "Thank you for telling me about this. In fact, I have been looking for my hammer." You seem a little different from a few days ago, seeing that Thor didn't have the impulsiveness and recklessness of the previous few meetings. He was even a little polite and wouldn't thank him. Jane Foster felt a little weird. It was as if he was a completely different person from the previous few times. "Isn't this the etiquette of your Earth? It was given to me by Doris." She said a man with manners would be liked. Though it reminds me of Loki. Smiling at Jane Foster, Thor looked in the direction of Mjolnir and then said to Jane Foster, "Sorry, Jane, I'm going to get my hammer." "Hey, there's a blockade over there, so you can't get in." Looking at Thor, who was very happy, and ran towards the place where the clouds and thunder gradually dissipated. Jane Foster gave a cry at once. He just looked at him as if he didn't listen. Jane Foster stomped her feet, then started the car and chased after Thor. "I'll drive you there. It's so far away from here." As Jane Foster started the car, she drove Thor towards the temporary camp set up by S.H.I.E.L.D. Soon, an agent who appeared out of nowhere took out his mobile phone and dialed. "Sir, according to our plan, Lady Jane Foster has inadvertently told Thor where the hammer fell. Now, they've driven in the direction of the hammer." "Yes, sir." After hanging up the phone, the agent shrugged his shoulders and proceeded to move the rest of the Aborigines out of the small town, and then let his group live in. "I heard from Instructor Doris that you only need to act as a common resident in this small town for 2 or 3 months. Then some more points will be scored on the Eagle's Nest graduation report. Well, is there any danger and can get a relatively high evaluation? What a bargain. After all, the higher the evaluation, the better the position of entering SHIELD after graduating from Eagle's Nest. At least, even if you start from a passerby SHIELD agent, you can at least reach level 5. The rookie detective who came out of the Eagle's Nest felt that this matter was very simple. But at the same time, Sue and Tony Stark felt that it was very difficult. Bang, bang. Da-da-da-da. Seeing countless bullets attacking himself, and Tony Stark wearing armor like a dense rain of fire. Suche turned his head speechlessly and looked at Tony Stark, who was wearing Mark's armor, and said, "This is the very common company you mentioned on Soli Island? Which common company will have all staff armed with firepower and greeted with a shuttle of bullets as soon as they walk in the door?" Listening to Suche's complaints, Tony Stark in the armor said indifferently, "Mr. Superman, bullets can't hurt you anyway. And they even refrained from using rockets. Plus, this company doesn't have, Qian Zhao, any super ability players like the old antique popsicles. Isn't this a common company?" Facing Tony Stark's harsh words, Suche, dressed as the Silver Moon Knight, raised his hand to Tony and raised a middle finger, symbolizing a friendly gesture. "Hurry up, I have to go back to pick up Wanda and Pietro from school in the afternoon. They had a very bad impression of you at first, if they knew it was because you delayed me from picking them up from school. It is estimated that their attitude towards you will be even worse." While talking, Suche began to deal with the guys in front of him, who were holding various weapons. Instead, Tony asked curiously while fighting back in his battle armor, "I wanted to ask you for a long time, why did the twins treat me so badly? I found out when I was in the coffee shop a few times ago. I really hope I didn't provoke them." Chapter 89. Tony. "If you say die, you will die. There will be no delay." Suche casually grabbed a guy who shot at him while chattering in a language he didn't understand and threw it out. Then he asked Tony Stark, "What does this guy say?" "Have no idea." After the palm energy cannon knocked the guy in front of him into the air, Tony Stark replied, "I would have asked JRVS to update the language information database before I knew it. You also know that there are many types of small languages in this world, and there are dozens of unrecorded ones, not to mention the indigenous languages of some small islands." While talking, Tony Stark and Suche speeded up cleaning up these guys. "By the way, buddy, you haven't said why Yamato Pietro is so cold to me. Let's talk about this when we go back." After seeing a guy sneaking towards the host, it seemed that he wanted to damage the host. Suche rushed in front of it in an instant, threw it into the air, and trapped him in a water prison. This common company appears to have a lot of people, actually without any super abilities. It worked out without any hassle, especially facing a metamorphosis with a perfect defense version of the Superman body, which can ignore any physical rule damage. 900 and another Iron Man, who is wearing armor and bullets, can't break the defense at all. The attacks of these guys are simply futile. Get rid of these guys. Tony Stark came to Suche's side. Dude, your ability is really convenient. Looking inside the mid-air dungeon at a height of half a person, the four were tied up in the shape of a large character by water. Even his mouth was stretched open by the current, making him unable to kill himself, but he was able to breathe freely. Tony Stark asked Suche, "Is there anything special about him?" Other guys attacked us immediately. Only this guy wanted to destroy the mainframe immediately. So I think this guy should know something. Hearing what Suche said, Tony's eyes lit up. Immediately take out the U-Disk and insert it into the host, and let JRVS quickly restore the contents of the host. Tony Stark asked the guy who was trapped and unable to move in the water prison, "Dude, can you understand what we are saying?" "Well, judging from the expression analysis, you should be able to understand, so don't try to lie to me." He took 2 steps forward and came to the front of the water dungeon, watching Suche control the water dungeon to descend to a position parallel to himself. After Tony thanked Suche, then he asked the guy trapped in the water prison, "Don't be brave. It's useless. You should tell what you know. Trust me. As long as you are willing to tell everything you know, then I guarantee you will survive." Listen to Tony Stark's assurances very seriously. The guy trapped in the water prison looked at him with pity. It seemed to be expressing that Tony Stark didn't know at all. What kind of existence is the enemy he is investigating again? Damn, I hate that look. Looking at the eyes of this guy in front of him, Tony Stark was about to continue to say something, but there were bursts of sirens not far away. Wow, who said they were always the last to arrive? I didn't expect the guys on this small island to be quite conscientious, but looking at your eyes, it seems that you're glad they came over. That is to say, it is very likely that they have been bribed by you, or are they simply with you? No wonder it came so quickly. Looking at the guy in the dungeon, Tony Stark turned his head to Suche and said, "So, Mr. Superman, is there a way to keep us from being disturbed?" "No problem. Come to the window and look at the endless sea outside." Suche turned his head and smiled at Tony Stark. "This is an island. As long as there is water, then I am invincible." After the words fell, Suche opened his arms. Originally, the sea breeze was gentle, and the sea surface was calm and waveless. But in an instant, it began to roar and turbulent. Almost in the blink of an eye, a terrifying tsunami tens of meters high suddenly rose from the calm sea. Before the people outside could respond, a tsunami tens of meters high hit the company directly. Hiss! Kafk, looking tens of meters high. The momentum is extremely terrifying. A monstrous tsunami that seems to be able to easily destroy all obstacles in front of it. Even Tony Stark felt the pressure of this catastrophic scene. It's just that when I saw the tsunami with a height of tens of meters actually volleyed over the ground of the island, then it enveloped the company layer by layer from the outside. Not even a drop of sea water seeped into the company. It's as if the whole company is like a lonely submarine in the deep sea. Tony Stark spread his hands to Suche and said, "Dude, for this meticulous control, maybe I should reevaluate your strength. Ask what you want to know. Maybe you can have lunch when you go back after asking." "No problem. When the time comes, I will treat you. You can eat whatever you want." Opening the visor, he blinked at Suche. Tony Stark asked directly to the people in the water dungeon, "You have also seen that the support you imagined is actually meaningless at all. So, my friend, I advise you to tell what you know. Otherwise, I'm afraid." Before Tony Stark could finish speaking, the guy whose mouth was open seemed to want to say something. "Well, from the very beginning, I was asked whether to talk or not. You gave me a chance to speak." "Oh, sorry, I forgot about this." "Dude, please get the water out of his mouth. I just remembered that the mouth of the guy in front of me was opened and sealed by water." Tony Stark spread his arms and laughed. "I just asked myself for a long time. This guy has been silent because he can't speak. Are you sure? I suggest that it's better to let him write it down. not say it. Hearing Tony Stark's request, Suche gave a reminder. But looking at Tony's self-confidence, it doesn't matter. Suche snapped his fingers lightly, unsealing the seal on the guy's mouth. The mouth was untied, although the whole person was still trapped in the water prison and could not move. But look at Tony Stark and the one by the window. The Silver Moon Knight seems to be admiring the colorful sea fish in the tsunami outside the company. The guy moved his mouth and then gave a cold laugh. Tony Stark, the famous playboy. I'd rather you call me a genius or a philanthropist. Don't think that you are invincible just because you put on the steel armor. Poor and sad Tony Stark. You and Silver Moon Knight will never know what kind of existence you have provoked. Looking at Tony Stark coldly, the guy's gaze gradually became firmer. Shut up without any hesitation and gritted his teeth, as if he was afraid that his mouth would be sealed with water again. As the guy gritted his teeth hard, his eyes soon swelled abruptly. A trace of special substance slowly flowed out from the corner of the mouth. I'm waiting in hell for you too. He viciously cursed the two of them. After speaking, the guy stopped breathing instantly. Well, die as soon as you say it. Without delay for a second. Chapter 90. Tony. Sue, you really are in a hole. God. Looking at the dead guy in front of him with a special substance on the corner of his mouth and swollen eyes. Tony Stark frowned subconsciously and took a step back. I was really taken aback by this scene in front of me. It's not that he has never seen Dead Man, but he has never seen a guy like this guy, who said he would die without any hesitation guy. What kind of strength is it that can cultivate such a willingness like him? And there is no half nostalgia. The guy who ends his life when he says he ends his life? I have to say, this scene really shocked Tony Stark. Cyanide came to Tony's side, watching him frown in a daze. Suche patted him on the shoulder to bring him back to his senses. What, are you scared? Somewhat. Facing Suche's question, Tony Stark nodded without concealment. I'm not frightened by his death. It was frightened by his firm attitude of choosing to die without hesitation. Damn it, what kind of insane force can train people like this? I can't imagine how many people like him are out there. Having said that, Tony Stark turned his head to look at Suche. Dude, we might be in big trouble this time. Scared? Seeing Tony's serious attitude, Su Xiao asked, It's too late to end the investigation now. How can it be? Listening to Suche's words, Tony Stark shook his head seriously. I was really shocked by this guy's firm choice just now. But the more this happens, the more I will find them out. This group of forces is really terrifying. I can't imagine that once this force, it's fine if I don't know about this kind of power, but now that I know about it and I'm involved, then I absolutely cannot sit idly by. It doesn't matter. It's because they instigated Obadiah Stine to plan to kidnap me, or their crazy way of doing things. Having said that, Tony Stark looked at Suche with a serious expression and said, I'm sorry, buddy. I brought you in too. So, I owe you one. I don't care. Seeing Tony's apologetic gaze, Suche smiled indifferently and said, But it doesn't seem to fit your personality. Tisk, dignified Tony Stark has also learned to apologize and learned to meddle in his own business. Depend on. Listening to Suche's words, Tony Stark gave Suche a middle finger without any hesitation. Could it be that in your heart I'm that kind of arrogant playboy who only knows how to have fun? Yes, and the evaluation is very pertinent. You're in a hole. He cast Suche an angry look, but Tony Stark knows that the impression he seems to give to other people seems to be true. When did you change and become responsible? Knowing that it will cause big trouble, but still ready to continue investigating Shadi? It seems that after being kidnapped, I saw those because of Stark industrial weapons flowing out through Obadiah Stine's private channels. As a result, countless people are ruined, and when they are displaced and become refugees, is this my own responsibility, or do I want to be redeemed in my heart in the face of those dead and displaced refugees? It doesn't seem to be that important. Many things have already happened and cannot be changed. Then the only thing I can do is not to condemn myself spiritually. Instead, there should be one counted one by one, completely destroying all the weapons circulated by the Stark industry. At least, it can't cause any disaster to happen. What are you thinking? Patting Tony Stark on the shoulder, Suche pointed outside. We should go. Good. Nodding his head, he turned around and removed the U disk on the main computer. After you go back, let JRVS analyze the statistics carefully to see if you can investigate any clues. By the way, Sue, you just said let the guy write it down, not let him talk about it. Did you already know this guy had poison in his mouth? I know a little, but I'm not sure, just in case. Damn, then you should have told me earlier. Wait, so you know what kind of power the other party is? Definitely knows, and knows better than anyone else. That I won't tell you, but I don't like to see you busy searching for clues. But you'd better only investigate to the surface, and then destroy all the weapons that the Stark industry leaked out without permission. Ask for flowers. If the investigation is too deep, once those guys go crazy, maybe something bad will happen. Don't worry, someone will deal with them. I always feel like you're fooling me. Yeah, have you learned to be smart? I knew, Sue, that you were a complete jerk. Thank you for the compliment, but you'd better get someone to prepare lunch in advance. Got it. I've asked people to help prepare his shit, BD. At the same time, Asgard. You mean someone picked up Thor's Mjolnir? Listening to Heimdall's report, Loki's expression turned ugly instantly. Why? Why on earth would anyone be able to pick up that Mjolnir? How can this be? How is it possible that anyone besides Thor can pick up Mjolnir? Obviously, I can't pick it up myself, but mere Earthlings are actually qualified? What is this? A person on Earth who is like an ant is actually more qualified than himself? This made Loki feel unacceptable for a while. Yes, someone did lift Thor's hammer. Looking at Loki, Heimdall said seriously. However, he just picked it up to summon the power of thunder, and then flew around in the sky before putting it back down. Looks like he likes his shield better than Mjolnir. But Loki, you'd better not do anything dangerous. The one who picked up Mjolnir is valued by someone. Listening to Heimdall's words, Loki frowned and thought for a moment. Where's Thor? Thor is riding in a vehicle on Earth, heading towards where Mjolnir is. You can see that he was very excited to find Mjolnir, but he didn't know about Thor, who had been stripped of his powers. Will it still be recognized by Mjolnir at this moment? Hear a hint of worry in Heimdall's tone. Loki nods that he understands. Wait until after Heimdall is gone. Loki held the gun of eternity, with a glint of haze in his eyes. 6. Chapter 91. Me. Tony Stark, you actually asked me to study the robot that cleans the room? Asgard. Your father once cast a spell on that hammer when he exiled Thor. Anyone who is qualified to pick up Mjolnir and is recognized by Mjolnir will gain the power of the god of thunder. Looking at Loki in front of him, Frigga smiled kindly. So if someone on Earth can pick up Mjolnir, then I'm not surprised at all. But mother, that hammer is an artifact of our Asgard, a symbol of Loki. Open your mind and take the long view. A qualified king will never get angry because of some trivial things. He should learn to be tolerant and learn to know what is the most important. Maybe the hammer has a different meaning in Asgard, but Loki, the most important thing in Asgard is not the hammer, nor the land. The most precious thing in Asgard will always be its people. Seeing Loki's eagerness, Tianho Fusher, 937, smiled and taught Loki. She knew that Loki was actually proud in his bones, whether it is facing people on Earth or people from other countries in the 9 realms. Loki always thought he was a god, a Protoss from Asgard. In his cognition, God can show mercy, play tricks, and despise those ants, but absolutely cannot accept the sympathy and kindness from the ants. Because this is a great insult to God. This mentality is wrong. At least I, who was raised by a witch, knows what a real god is. Loki's mind is already set, if not changed. Then there will surely be some pain and suffering in the future. As a mother, Frigga was naturally reluctant that her youngest son would suffer hardships in the future. So she felt that it was necessary for her to tell Loki what is the mentality and quality that a qualified king should possess. Just watching Loki's expression, Frigga sighed inwardly. This child was brought up by himself. So how could he not know that although he was nodding, he didn't listen to his words at all? Watching Loki leave very politely, Queen Frigg looked sadly at her sleeping husband. Maybe back then, when my husband wanted to bestow Loki with the Vulcan godhood, I should stand up and insist against it, instead of being persuaded by him after talking to him twice. Well, Earth. In fact, Suche never thought of completely concealing the identity of the Silver Moon Knight. What he thought, and what Natasha Romanoff said, It has always been that there are not many superheroes in this world, and before the establishment of the Avengers Alliance, I will not reveal my identity for the time being. At least this non-disclosure refers to when facing those common people. I don't want common people to know their identity and be disturbed. Otherwise, if you want to hide your identity all the time, then when Nick Fury sent Steve Rogers over, you should just refuse directly. Not to mention later, when Tony Stark joined in, Suche still had no objection. Therefore, although the vast majority of common people are guessing who Silver Moon Rider is, but Suche is not at all surprised that a small group of people guessed Suche's real identity. I was with Steve Rogers every day, and a Tony Stark was added later. It's impossible to let those intelligent people guess it. Instead of caring about this, Suche is more concerned. It's Tony Stark. Can this guy develop a powerful and intelligent robot that sweeps and wipes the floor? Welcome back. Welcome to be our guest, Mr. Sue. As soon as he entered Tony Stark's villa, JRVS greeted him loudly. This is JRVS, my smart housekeeper and my best assistant. Hearing the voice of JRVS, Tony Stark introduced to Suche. This is Jenny, my new life assistant. Having said that, Tony Stark looked at Suche and shrugged his shoulders. You also know that after Obadiah Stane was arrested, Stark Industries lacked a CEO. I'm not good at it, and I don't want to manage these things, and the board members wanted to send a CEO, but I refused. I'm too lazy to argue with those guys. I let people go up. So, Jenny has become my new life assistant. Hello, Mr. Sue. Listening to Tony Stark's introduction, the woman named Jenny smiled and extended her hand to Suche. Hello. He shook hands with Jenny. At the same time, Suche made a judgment immediately. There is a less obvious roughness in the tiger's mouth on the right hand, and there is a thin callus on the palm and under the fingers. Explain that this is a master with a gun. That must have been sent by Nick Fury. Nodding without leaving a trace, watching Jenny handing Tony Stark a bottle of dark green or even some black liquid. 0, and Tony Stark drank it after taking it. Since when did I like to subconsciously analyze people I met for the first time? It seems to start from when I met Steve, listening to him reminisce about the past. Many things were said by Steve Rogers inadvertently when he missed the past when he was fishing, and then he was remembered by himself. Then, learn by yourself. In fact, Steve's analysis ability is very strong, whether it is facing a person or an unfamiliar environment. His analysis ability is one of the best in the entire Avengers Alliance. So whenever fishing in the afternoon, making Nautian talk about the past like an old man, Suche can subtly and secretly learn a lot of things that he has never been exposed to before. Let's go to my research room and show you some good things. After drinking the black-green liquid in one gulp, Tony Stark winked at Sue with a little complacency. It seems that I can't wait to show off my good stuff. What did you drink just now? While walking towards the research room of Tony's villa, Sue D asked. Nothing, just some chlorophyll. Well, chlorophyll can slightly alleviate the effects of palladium poisoning. So Tony Stark drank that thing almost every day during this time, at least until a complete solution to the problem of palladium poisoning has been developed. Although it is unpalatable, Tony is not ready to give up. Entering Tony's laboratory by pressing the combination lock, Suche looked at the various exquisite equipment in the laboratory. Suche suddenly said to Tony, "By the way, can you develop a robot that can automatically sweep and mop the floor, preferably a robot that can wash clothes and do housework?" Water. Listen to Suche's words. After coming to the laboratory, Tony Stark, who just wanted to show off his own invention, was obviously taken aback. What the hell? A robot that can sweep and mop the floor to do housework? In front of this room, full of various high-tech products. You actually asked me if I could build a robot that does housework? Come on, I'm Tony Stark, the greatest genius and billionaire of this century. You actually asked me to help you research housekeeping robots? Do you want to be so overkill? However, it seems that it is not impossible. Chapter 92, the 11th diary entry, the distraught Wanda was almost awakening. New Mexico. Listening to Phil Coulson debriefing that Thor was unable to pick up Mjolnir and become extremely lost, even decadent. With his gentle encouragement, Doris even cooked a big meal for him. This made Thor's emotions recover a lot later. Nick Fury finally felt a little more at ease. It seems that this time Doris didn't go too far, although she still doesn't know how Doris will end up. But he is full of confidence in this Doris who is known as Medusa. Anyway, as long as it's not the same bad taste as before, or it's not a big problem to turn Thor into a piece of hard to clean up. Well, Phil Coulson has full authority over the matter here, and I can go back to SHIELD with peace of mind. Alright, in fact, Nick Fury has to admit that what Doris did to Thor is indeed much more exciting than in his short composition. As the best psychotherapist and agent of SHIELD ever, and one of the 3 most trusted members of S.H.I.E.L.D., her ability is even stronger than Iron Knight Melinda. If it wasn't for the accident caused by the 20 people from Skrull a few years ago, which made her methods become, Nick Fury also wouldn't let her go to the Eagle's Nest to cultivate her mind and become a mentor to the rookies at the same time. This is really overkill. Damn, those Skrulls have been in SHIELD for 10 or 20 years. Let them pretend to be other people. They are better than anyone else. But it's not enough to make them cooperate to carry out the task. I flip through the Black Gold diary casually. Nick Fury discovers that the diary has been updated. Getting up and closing the door, Nick Fury was going to wait until after reading this diary before getting up and going back to the SHIELD Trident headquarters. At least you don't have to block everything here. Nick Fury doesn't believe that he will be monitored here. Wanda and Pietro are picked up by Natasha Romanoff. During the week Natasha Romanoff and Steve were away, Wanda and Pietro stayed with me. Let me relive the events of the year. In my world, when Wanda and our Avengers alliance met, it was not during the Ultron period. In the beginning, she and Pietro were planning to help Ultron, but later realized that Ultron's plan was to destroy the Earth and eliminate all life on the Earth to complete the purification. Then, she became one of us. It was also in the battle with Ultron that Wanda lost her younger brother because she went to Pete. This is also the reason why those members of the Avengers Alliance behind hope that Wanda and I will have a baby soon, and then we can name it Pietro. Later, whenever she and I talked about the past together, she would say that Pietro was actually the big brother. Just to make her happy, Pietro just called her sister. Manhattan, inside Natasha Romanoff's apartment. Looking at the latest updated content of the diary, Wanda raised her head. A look of confusion flashed in her eyes. Died? Pietro is dead? Pietro will die in a battle with that Ultron in the future? No wonder in the first diary, the content is written about the future child of himself and Suche, named Pietro. When I first saw this diary, I was only shy and didn't imagine the deep meaning in it. But now, thinking of the future, his only student, Pietro, will die. Wanda's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. It felt like my heart was being pulled and torn apart by something. The pain that kept growing from the bottom of my heart even made Wanda feel as if he was about to suffocate. Under the huge amounts of pain, Wanda didn't even realize that her eyes gradually began to glow slightly red. Even the dishes on the dining table moved slightly. In fact, Wanda and Pietro's ability is born, not given by Mind Gem. Mind Gem just opened up this layer of shackles, which can be regarded as a medium, allowing Wanda and Pietro to discover their ability. This can be seen from Wanda's sitcom. The reason why the 8-year-old Stark industrial missile didn't explode was because it was activated within hours of hiding under the bed. Ability rewrote reality. Natasha Romanoff just coming out of the bathroom. A sad, heartbroken Wanda on the sofa. I was taken aback immediately. What's the matter? What happened? It's okay. It doesn't matter no matter what happens. My sister is still here. Stepping forward to hug Wanda without any hesitation, Natasha Romanoff comforted her constantly and softly like a sister. From Wanda's distraught expression just now, Natasha Romanoff was able to analyze it immediately. Wanda didn't suffer from some kind of sudden illness. Otherwise, Natasha Romanoff would have run to the hospital with Wanda in her arms, or called an emergency immediately. Pietro. Listening to Wanda sobbing in extreme grief, saying intermittently that Pietro will die or something like that. This made Natasha Romanoff unable to react for a while. Pietro is dead? He listened carefully, and at the moment Pietro was in his own room, reciting the homework assigned by the teacher loudly. How come? Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at the black and gold diary that fell on the sofa. Natasha Romanoff reflected in an instant. It should be that the diary has been updated, and Wanda saw what Sue wrote in the diary about what happened in the future. Picking up the black gold diary without any hesitation, Natasha Romanoff hugged Wanda and kept comforting her, while quickly flipping to the latest updated diary. He quickly glanced at the few lines ahead. Only then did I understand why Wanda looked distraught at the moment. In fact, since adopting Wanda and Pietro as their two guardians. If we talk about the beginning, Natasha Romanoff also regards this as a task. But as time goes by, especially these months of getting along, for Natasha Romanoff, who never had a family, returned to an empty apartment alone every time she finished her mission. This pair of obedient, well-behaved, and sensible twins. She has long regarded them as her younger siblings. So when you see what is written in the diary, Pietro will die after the battle with Ultron in the future. Natasha Romanoff also felt a little unacceptable. But the more important thing now is to comfort Wanda. The child is only 15 years old this year. He lost his parents early on, and now only Pietro is left as a brother who depends on each other. Whoever it is, I am afraid they will not be able to accept it. Chapter 93 Wanda. I'm sorry, I'm lying? No, I'm Hydra. After comforting for a while, Natasha Romanoff raised her hand and gently wiped away the tears from Wanda's face. Although it was described in Sue's diary, Pietro will die in the battle with Ultron in the future. However, since we know this kind of thing in advance now, we can naturally avoid Pietro from going out in the future. Can't we? Look, since Sue came to our universe from the parallel universe, the future has changed a lot compared to what is happening now. He hugged Wanda and patted her on the back lightly, as if coaxing his own sister. Natasha Romanoff also has a trace of tenderness that belongs only to her family. For example, you and Pietro were brought back from Sokovia by us ahead of time, right? Without Sue, your siblings should still be in Sokovia by now. For example, according to the records in the diary, it will take 2 years for us to find the frozen Steve. But now, Steve is not only rescued from the ice in advance, but also drinking coffee and fishing with Sue every day, not to mention how pleasant it is. In fact, Sue's coming to this world and the appearance of the black gold diary not only let us know many things in the future in advance, it will allow us to avoid future tragedies. Speaking of this, Natasha Romanoff rubbed Wanda's forehead with her forehead affectionately, and then smiled softly. It's like me. I've always been alone, even with the Sichayeldi, even with Hawkeye. But every time I come back from a mission, I'm alone. But because of Sue, I now have a pair of twin siblings. Since my life can change, then Pietro's future trajectory will definitely change. Listen to Natasha Romanoff's gentle, yet firm tone. Wanda sniffled, then nodded vigorously. Sister Natasha Romanoff has a point. Now that something has changed, it has already appeared on himself and Pietro. Then Pietro's fate will definitely change in the future. At least, no matter what price I pay, I will never let Pietro die in the battle with Ultron. If it doesn't work, I will drag him to hide in a corner or run away. After the idea gradually became clear, Wanda breathed a sigh of relief. I just saw the news that Pietro would die, and my mind was in a mess. Feeling the tender embrace of Natasha Romanoff, Wanda hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "Actually, what?" Looking at Wanda's hesitation, she seemed to want to say something. With a warm smile, Natasha Romanoff gently stroked Wanda's slightly messy hair. Actually, when we were in Sokovia, the castle where Pietro and I lived was an organization called HYDRA. It seems like a big decision has been made. Wanda looked at Natasha Romanoff, who was like a sister, and finally made up her mind to tell Natasha Romanoff the truth of the matter. Pietro and I joined that organization at the beginning, and it was only later that we found out that their organization's name is HYDRA. Those people not only have a large number of weapons and armed personnel in the castle, but also the fighter jets we took when we came back, and Kunk and the like. There are also some weapons that can emit blue beams that Pietro and I have never seen before. In addition, the Hydra organization secretly captured many children for experiments. They want to see if they can turn common people into super ability people through experiments. It's just that they seem to have been failing all the time, and a lot of people died. Listen to Wanda. The hand that was stroking her hair paused for a moment. Then he looked at Wanda and asked very seriously, "You didn't tell anyone about this, did you?" "No." Seeing Natasha Romanoff's serious expression, Wanda immediately shook her head. "When we came here, Baron Strucker didn't allow me and Pietro to tell anyone about this. Otherwise, he said that no matter where we hide, he will send people to hunt us down." Listening to Wanda's words, Natasha Romanoff thought about it. Then he whispered to Wanda, "Remember, completely forget about this matter. Sister will find someone to deal with this matter. You and Pietro must not tell the third person." Looking at Natasha Romanoff's solemn expression, Wanda is no longer a child, so she naturally knows the seriousness of the matter. But soon he said to Natasha Romanoff, "However, it seems that Sue also knows, after all, he is in a parallel world. He should have known about it a long time ago." Embracing Wanda again, Natasha Romanoff smiled. "Otherwise, he would not write in the diary, 'The Colonist Chayeldi is not trustworthy.'" Saying that, Natasha Romanoff picked up the diary and smiled with Wanda. "I want to read this diary. I will talk about these things after reading it." "Good." Nodding slightly, Wanda turned her attention to the diary again. "Pietro died in the battle with Ultron, which we don't want to see. It's just that the battle line was too long and too far at that time, and when the incident happened suddenly, we had no time to rescue. For this reason, Calente was annoyed for a long time, and even named his youngest son Nathaniel Pietro Barton. But this time, the same error will not appear again. Like that damn finger snapping. Look at the diary and right here." Even Wanda, who was a little worried, breathed a sigh of relief. For Suche, Wanda is still very confident, since he said in his diary, Pietro would not die like a parallel universe with him. Then he will definitely do it. Will. However, when I went to Tony's house today, I found that Tony has been drinking chlorophyll juice. It seems that Tony already knows about palladium element poisoning and has found a way to reduce it. Festival. However, this method can only suppress it a little in the short term, and it doesn't have much effect. Natasha Romanoff said that Nick Fury went to New Mexico, and he definitely did it because of Thor's hammer that fell from the sky. After he comes back, he has to find a way to get Nick Fury to hand over to Nortel the things left by his father, Howard Stark. This is the most important step for Tony to reconcile with his father in his heart, and it is also about the most effective way for him to use the key of the future to create new elements and suppress palladium poisoning. Otherwise, Tony's palladium poisoning will get worse every time the Mark armor is used. However, if you want to persuade Tony not to use the armor anymore, it is probably more difficult than getting Steve to hand over the shield. Well, not necessarily. After all, the future Steve handed over the shield to Falcon Sam. Make him the next Captain America. Pity. Chapter 94. Alas. Pray for Thor. He is a demon again. Magic mind control? Looking at the system prompt, after Frigga's trust value reached 50%, the ability he got. Suche received the reward directly, without any hesitation. But having said that, Queen Frigga of Asgard is a mage who was raised by a female. So, the ability I obtained is spiritual magic? It should not be like this. Otherwise, the steel body of the ultimate perfect water system ability Superman cannot be explained clearly. Open the system's personal attributes panel, and soon, the personal information will appear in front of Suche. Ost, Suke. Age, 19 years old. The age of the parallel timeline of the Black Gold Diary. Identity, the first generation of Avengers in the parallel world Pseudo, the owner of the Black Gold Diary. Ability, ultimate perfect water control, Superman steel body, perfect defense upgrade version. 10 times the peak physical fitness of ordinary people. Mind demon mage. Mission, none permanent. Number of enemies that can be created, unlimited. Interference with the timeline makes the planet Devourer descend progress. 1%. Looking at the system panel, Suche folded his arms and focused on the last item. As we all know, the Balrog Olivia Temple claimed to be the messenger of the gods. Before he was killed by himself, he once said that the great master will definitely come, and so on. Definitely. The main purpose of this statement is to gain the trust of people like Natasha Romanoff and Nick Fury. However, If the progress bar reaches 100%, will the planet Devourer really descend on the Earth? Although every major Marvel event, Galactus always feels that it lacks that meaning without sacrificing once. But now if he faces Galactus, it seems that he really has no chance of winning. After all, as one of the 5 gods of Marvel, where is the ability of the planet Devourer? etc. Looking at the sentence on the system profile page, interfering with the timeline caused the planet Devourer to descend. Who is the first character that comes to mind when you think of a character related to the Marvel timeline? Conqueror Kang's time administration. Behind the Supreme Mage Ancient One is Eternity, one of the 5 gods. So Kang the Conqueror established the time administration. Is the person behind him the planet Devourer? It seems that there is nothing to do with half a dime. After all, whether it is a sculpture of the Time Management Bureau or the symbol behind the ruling court, it is a guy with 3 heads. That's right, it's the Life Court. However, there seems to be no connection between them. But who's to say you can't codify, create their associations? Anyway, when I created Balrog Olivia Temple, it was because it was my first creation. I was also worried that I would be out of play, so I asked Olivier to use the role of Temple very sloppily. How about using Olivia Temple to tie it all together and be the one button in the series? Well, the hats are all for the Devourer of the planet, as one of the 5 gods in the Marvel Universe. He shouldn't care about taking the blame for himself. And I said in the first chapter of the Black Gold Diary that the reason for the destruction of my parallel world was because of the countless Conqueror Kang, countless monsters, and the Celestial Group. If you don't connect these things together, you will feel sorry for the despair you wrote in your first diary. Still under the simulation of the system, I personally experienced the experience of extreme despair. Well, anyway, during the Kangji meeting, all kinds of Kangs appeared, and it is normal to pick one out at random. They take the blame, increase the number of diary entries by themselves, and get the benefits of various strengths. Hey, beauty! At the same time, I'm really lucky. An unbelievable, decadent, frustrated Thor. Under the comfort of Medusa Diaries, her emotions gradually recovered. Looking at this beautiful, gentle, caring, and coquettish girlfriend in front of her, she loved her from the bottom of her heart. Thor caressed Doris' cheek with one hand and said emotionally, "If it is my greatest misfortune to be exiled to the earth, then none of this matters now. Because meeting you is the luckiest thing I've ever done in the past 1,500 years." Seeing Thor's eyes full of affection, Doris gently rubbed her cheek against Thor's palm like a charming cat. You know how to make me happy every day. I mean what I say, and I can assure you." Hearing Doris' disbelief, Thor hurriedly and earnestly assured that what he just said was true. "Look at your stupidity." Gently pinching the tip of Thor's nose with pale fingers, Doris said with a bright smile, "I don't know that what you said is true. Okay, now that your mood has recovered, you should eat well. You haven't eaten properly for 3 days since you couldn't hold that hammer." Saying that, Doris got up from the sofa, then bent down and lightly touched Thor's forehead with her forehead. "Wait for me obediently at home. I'll go shopping for vegetables and cook you a big meal tonight. Even if you are a god, you can't do without eating well." Looking at his girlfriend's tone, he coaxed himself like a child. Not to mention, Thor really eats this set. Raising his hand and scratching his head, Thor grinned silly and said, "I made you worry." "Nonsense, you're my boyfriend. I'm not worried." "What are you worried about?" "Others don't deserve to make me worry." Picking up the bag and winking charmingly at Thor, Doris turned and went out with a smile. Watching the back of Doris leaving, Thor leaned on the sofa and looked at the ceiling, as if thinking of something. Then he laughed a few times to himself. That expression, just like the silly son of the landlord's family. Outside, is the construction site ready? Detouring behind the house and opening the car door to get in the car, Doris sat in the co-pilot and asked Phil Coulson, "According to your request, the construction site next to this small town has been prepared. But you really want Thor to experience the life of a construction worker? Can he do it? What do you say?" He squinted at Phil Coulson. Look at the way Phil Coulson shrugs his shoulders and says everything's going your way. Only then did Lizzie nodded in satisfaction. You don't need money to eat, and you don't need money to live. If you want a man to mature the fastest, You must first cultivate his sense of responsibility and responsibility. Thor is different from some rich second generations. Although he does not lack these responsibilities, many things need to be taught to him little by little. However, we can't use the principles that all people on Earth know. We have to use events to guide them, and let him take this responsibility willingly. Every day, he instilled in him great truths, saying how good the Earth is, and that he will protect the Earth in the future. Isn't this a joke? Even the rookies in the Eagle's Nest, I teach, know not to use youthful methods. Listening to what Doris said, Phil Coulson sat in the driver's seat and shrugged his shoulders. Anyway, the director told me before leaving that the matter about Thor is entirely up to you. As long as it's not too much, then I just need to be responsible and cooperate. Listen to Phil Coulson say Nick Fury is gone. Doris' eyes lit up first, but then she seemed to think of something. After shaking his head slightly, he looked out the car window. Actually, looking at Doris' expression, Phil Coulson understood what she was thinking at the moment. Actually, Thor is different. While giving him a change, Doris, it may not be for yourself. Shut up, Phil Coulson. Before Phil Coulson could finish speaking, Doris turned her head and looked at Phil Coulson very coldly. It seemed like a very poisonous snake was staring at its prey. It's a feeling that even Phil Coulson can't bear. Maybe you need a psychiatrist, Doris. It's like a cavalry. Why facing Doris's coldness and biting bones? It seemed that she could feel Huang Yi's gaze from the bottom of her heart. Instead, Phil Coulson felt a little empathy. He knew what happened to Doris, the female agent who was once far superior to Iron Cavalry Melinda and Natasha Romanoff. If it is said that Iron Cavalry Melinda may suffered the first level of psychological trauma because of the incident with the little girl, then Doris' previous experience was level 10. Psychiatrist? Huh. Taking out a lady's cigarette from her bag and lighting it lightly, Deli's red lips gently exhaled a cloud of light blue smoke. I was originally the top psychiatrist in SHILD, Phil Coulson. Do you think other psychiatrists use it before me? That can't always be like this, Doris, you. That's pretty good too. Looking out of the car window, under the blue sky at this moment, white clouds are floating with the wind. Doris's tone was obviously much softer. It's like Melinda transferred to be a logistics clerk. It's also very good for me to teach those rookies in the Eagle's Nest. You're a good man, Phil Coulson, and if you ever get the chance, leave us at SHILD and leave SHIELD. SHILD is not for you, and it's not as clean as you think. What's the meaning? Hearing what Doris said, Phil Coulson was a little puzzled. It's okay. You will know sooner or later. Turning his head to look at Phil Coulson and laughing. By the way, remember that Thor's hourly salary on the construction site cannot exceed 5 yuan an hour. Otherwise, it will make him earn more, and it won't be fun later on. Anyway, he doesn't know how much the hourly salary is stipulated here. Speaking of this, Doris seemed to have thought of something. That girl named Jane Foster hasn't moved away. No, according to Dr. Selvig's request, Jane Foster and her girlfriends are still here, right next to you. Well, keep an eye on her. She is the key to take over orders in the future. As she said that, Doris casually stubbed out the lady's cigarette, then opened the car door and said to Phil Coulson, "Actually, this mission is quite interesting, so let's take it easy." After watching Doris finish speaking, she turned and left without any hesitation. Phil Coulson opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. In the end, I could only sigh silently. It's pathetic for Thor to be played into the applause. But what about my former boss, Medusa Doris? You know, she was once the most trusted by Nick Fury, and she was considered the best candidate for the next director of SHILD after him. Chapter 95 Sukikanti Bidra. SHILD. After watching Nick Fury press the shield button, Natasha Romanoff sat across from Nick Fury's desk and said, "Have you read Sue's diary, Nick?" "Seen it already." Nodding slightly, Nick Fury said to Natasha Romanoff, "Although this diary is not very long, there are many potential contents in it." "Yes." After getting up to get himself a glass of water, Natasha Romanoff sat down again and said, "We all know about Tony Stark's palladium poisoning. But now I know that as long as he wears the Mark armor, Tony Stark's palladium poisoning will be aggravated. In addition, I didn't expect that the original cure of palladium poisoning would rely on the relics of the deceased Mr. Howard Stark." Having said that, Natasha Romanoff took a sip from the water glass. Then he explained his intention to Nick Fury. But Nick, I didn't come here to talk about this matter. Whether it's Tony Stark's palladium poisoning or what's written in the diary. In the future, Steve will hand over the shield to that Falcon Sam. These future things are not that important for now. After this diary was updated, it said that Pietro would die in the future battle with Ultron. Suddenly, Wanda, who saw the news, couldn't bear it. Is she all right? Listening to Natasha Romanoff, Nick Fury asked. As one of the holders of the Black Gold Diary, Nick Fury knows how different Wanda holds in Suche's heart. It's much better after my comfort. However, it is precisely because of this that Wanda has officially accepted me for the first time and is willing to treat me as a real sister. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, but it also brought a bad summer. Putting the water glass on the table, Natasha Romanoff looked at Nick Fury and said, since Wanda was willing to accept me from the bottom of her heart, she directly told me a piece of bad news. Do you know what organization Wanda and Pietro joined when they were in Sokovia? Without waiting for Nick Fury to answer, Natasha Romanoff said seriously, Hydra? You sure? Nick Fury, who originally had a relaxed expression, heard Natasha Romanoff's words. The whole person became serious in an instant. You mean Wanda and Pietro have been staying in Hydra all the time? That's right. Looking at Nick Fury, Natasha Romanoff nodded. This is what Wanda personally admitted, and the Hydra group in Sokovia not only has powerful armed forces, but also has been secretly conducting experiments. It's similar to the kind of experiment that turns common people into super ability users. Unfortunately, they have always failed. So many experimental subjects died. Obviously, that's not what Natasha Romanoff meant to say. But when the words came to the mouth, it turned into this again. It was Nick Fury who caught the meaning of Tasha's subtext. It was Sitwell who sent someone to find the Wanda siblings. It was he who quickly found the address of the Wanda twins, and then Hill went to pick up the twins himself. If what Wanda said is true, that Sokovia really has a Hydra base, then how did Sitwell find the Wanda siblings so quickly? Unless he is also a member of HYDRA. Having said that, Nick Fury tapped on the table lightly. Sokovia is poor and war-torn. If there is a Hydra base, it is not surprising to choose where. But where did the money for the development of military force come from for so many years of research funding? Just relying on one Sokovia is not enough to call them a flow of funds. If Sitwell is also a member of HYDRA, then everything is very clear. Sitwell is Alexander Pierce's most trusted associate. Pierce is the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Most importantly, Pierce has been one of the liaisons with the World Security Council. At this point in the analysis, Nick Fury pinched his brows lightly. If Alexander Pierce is a member of HYDRA, is there a member of Hydra in the World Security Council? If HYDRA can infiltrate even SHIELD, what about Congress, business, and other industries? Listening to Nick Fury's analysis, there was no surprise on his expression. Natasha Romanoff picked up the water glass again and asked curiously, Nick, you already knew? No, it's just a guess. Facing Natasha Romanoff's questioning, Nick Fury leaned back on the seat. From the moment I read Sue's description in the Black Gold Diary, SHIELD is not trustworthy. I have more or less guesses in my mind. For this, I have made some confirmation and preparations. In the end, as expected, some evidence was dug up that I least expected to see. I've guessed that behind this chain of evidence, there is still a big group of dark clouds. It's just, looking at Nick Fury's expression, Natasha Romanoff said seriously, Nick, no matter what, this matter must not be implicated in Wanda and Pietro. I don't want anything to happen to them. You should be clear that once something happens to Wanda and Pietro, once Sue gets angry, the consequences may be disastrous. I definitely know this. Hearing Natasha Romanoff's words, Nick Fury actually had the heart to laugh. By the way, Sue and Tony Stark are investigating the anonymous account of Obadiah Stein's private channel. Natasha Romanoff, you follow up on this matter. See if you can dig up some material on this matter. Then find a way to attribute the excavated things to HYDRA. It is best to lead the clues directly to the Hydra base in Sokovia. Clear. Listening to Nick Fury's order, Natasha Romanoff nodded. That's good, so the twins Wanda and Pietro can be taken out of this matter. Secondly, concoct some evidence to lead the conspiracy to the Hydra base in Sokovia, and maybe bring out some big fish. Seeing that Natasha Romanoff understood what he meant, Nick Fury signaled Natasha Romanoff to get ready. After Natasha Romanoff left, Nick Fury turned off the shield button and let Maria Hill in. In fact, there's one thing Nick Fury didn't tell Natasha Romanoff. That is, he plans to use the Sokovia HYDRA base to form Avengers in advance. Before the event that the Avengers Alliance first rallied against the Chitauri invasion, as recorded in the diary, took place. Or the Sufu League was formed in advance because of the Sokovia HYDRA base incident. It can also hone the tacit understanding between the team. In order not to happen as recorded in the diary, Tony Stark needs to play with the Warshin and carry the mushroom eggs into the universe to blow up Chitauri's battleship. Asking for flowers. For the first time, the Avengers Alliance members accepted him from the bottom of their hearts. From this point alone, Nick Fury is not difficult to analyze. At that time, when the Avengers Alliance assembled to fight against the aliens, their minds were definitely not so unified. At least the friction between the teams is definitely not small. He'll pack what Mr. Howard Stark left in SHIELD and hand it over to Tony Stark. Watching him walk in, Nick Fury said to her, "Okay, is everything? Materials, notes, video recordings, etc. As for some very harmful ones, they are temporarily closed. Clear." Listening to Nick Fury's order, Maria Hill nodded. But this time, he didn't leave simply and neatly. "Why, what else is there?" Seeing Hill standing there looking at him, Nick Fury asked, "I wonder why every time Natasha Romanoff comes to report to you, you have to turn on the blocking measures and let me out." Looking at Nick Fury, Maria Hill asked her doubts. All along, Nick Fury is not shy about anything. Until Natasha Romanoff contacted the young man named Suche once. After that, everything seemed to start to hide from myself. Definitely, the reason why I ask this is not against the rules, because I should not know what I know. Even if he asked, Nick Fury wouldn't say it. So, why ask about export? The reason is very simple. Don't forget that Hill also has an identity. The World Security Council came to supervise the work of Nick Fury. So her purpose of asking Nick Fury is simple. That is to see what these two people are planning, even if they can't tell themselves. At least give yourself a reasonable excuse in case there is any big move, so that you can deal with the people on the World Security Council. Also let yourself have a preparation. It's like Nick Fury has been greedy for funding from the World Security Council to build a moon base since the Anton's Cruise. In the whole process, I have been helping to hide it from the World Security Council. It can't be that some big moves have already taken place, and the World Security Council asks itself, but they don't know anything. This is not good for follow-up work. There is indeed something big about to happen, and it's about HYDRA. In the face of Hill's questioning, the tacit understanding over the years has let Nick Fury know what she is thinking. So he didn't hide anything and told her what happened. Definitely, there is a lot of concealment, such as having a direct relationship with Suche. For example, the matter of the Black Gold Diary. The holder of the Black Gold Diary cannot tell the non-holders about the Black Gold Diary. So listening to Nick Fury has some obvious holes, always missing some key words. Maria Hill nodded to show that she knew. Although it always feels that many things seem to be discovered or even unfolded around Suche. Even if Suche is brought into this matter, then many explanations are reasonable. But that young man named Suche should not be HYDRA. Chapter 96 Hydra. Don't provoke the Silver Moon Knight. Trash, idiot moth. It took so much resources and time to push you. You can't even be the speaker, and you've got flaws everywhere. Listening to the elders who accused and cursed themselves in front of them. Counselor Stern's fat body was sitting on the sofa, with cold sweat constantly flowing from his forehead. Yes, this Senator Stern is the later one who wanted Tony Stark to hand over his armor. At the same time, he is also a part of HYDRA. Generally speaking, his current status is not high, but he is also a member of the Senate anyway. It can also be regarded as the backbone of HYDRA. Generally, people inside Hydra really don't have the right to reprimand him. Not to mention pointing your nose and cursing. But since Red Skull John Schmidt disappeared because of Tesseract, as far as Hydra has become an elder system, he can be regarded as an elite at best. Kind of on the same level as Sitwell, the guy who got kicked down the stairs by Natasha Romanoff, got caught by Falcon, and got all recruited when he faced Steve. Therefore, when faced with reprimand or even cursing by the elders, Stern could only curl his neck and listen. Sir, I didn't expect that Tony Stark and that Silver Moon Knight would investigate this far. I trash. That's why I say you're a trash. Watching Senator Stern explaining constantly while wiping his sweat. 550, the elder in front of him, who looked older than him, pointed at him in disbelief. When Howard Stark and his wife were killed by Winter Soldier, I asked you to arouse Obadiah Stan's ambition. But it took so many years for you to succeed, let alone succeed, but you still haven't succeeded. It's fine if it just doesn't work. At least you have to clear the connection with that Obadiah idiot's private channel. He's been dead for more than 2 months, and you can't let Tony Stark investigate this far? Even the idiot who can't be cleared from the beginning to the end. Once Tony Stark follows this clue to track us down, then I will send you to see Mr. John Schmidt with my own hands. Yes, I'm sorry, sir. This is my negligence. Facing the elders constantly accusing and cursing, Counselor Stern quickly raised his head and said, Sir, I didn't expect Tony Stark to be able to find out this step. I was just thinking of using Obadiah Stane to get rid of Tony Stark. After all, once we do it ourselves, Nick Fury will pay attention. So you used your secret connections and let the FBI guys let him go. Looking at Senator Stern with a gloomy expression, the elder snorted coldly. Did you know that since Howard Stark died, Nick Fury has paid more attention to Tony Stark? Otherwise, I would have asked someone to get rid of Tony Stark long ago. So I don't need you to bewitch the idiot Obadiah Stane. I don't care what method you use now. Immediately cut off all clues. Absolutely, Tony Stark can investigate us. If it affects our Hydra Insight plan that has been planned for decades, then even if you die 100 times, it will not be enough. Understood? I will immediately cut off all connections, constantly nodding like pounding garlic. Stern hesitated for a moment, then tentatively said cautiously, Sir, I think we can cause some trouble for Tony Stark on the surface. For example, he turned off the Stark industrial weapon, but he researched the steel armor. Therefore, we can hold a hearing and think that the armor is one of the weapons. No matter what the final result of the hearing is, it will cause a period of delay for Tony Stark. I can also take advantage of this time to let the people below cut off all the clues. Listen to Senator Stern's cautious proposal. The elder thought for a while, and then agreed. This proposal is not bad. At least you can use your brain a little bit, which is better than that idiot Obadiah Stane. But you have to do it seriously. If you can get Tony Stark to hand over the armor or hand over the core information, that's the best. Even if you can't, don't force it. At least don't get Nick Fury's attention. Yes, sir. Hearing that the elder agreed to his proposal, Senator Stern felt a little relieved. Quietly wiped the sweat from his forehead, and then continued, Sir, about that Silver Moon cavalry. Before Stern could ask, the elder squinted at him. That expression seemed to be looking at a stupid pig. You still don't know the real identity of the Silver Moon Knight? That Silver Moon Knight didn't hide it at all, and almost made it public in front of the media. He leaned heavily on the floor with his cane, and the elder had some wishes. Why did I push such a fool to send it to Congress in the first place? Nick Fury has been following a young psychiatrist named Suche, now the owner of a coffee shop. Natasha Romanoff is also very close to this Suche. So the Silver Moon Knight first appeared, and he and Natasha Romanoff took on that damn thing with horns on its head. Then Nick Fury sent Steve Rogers over there. These two spend every day together. And then when Tony Stark and Obadiah fight, Silver Moon Knight shows up with Captain America. And then Tony Stark got on really well with him. And then Iron Man appeared on that damned island with the Silver Knight. Looking at Stern, the elder felt that he could hardly suppress his patience. He is so obvious that you can't even detect that he didn't hide his identity at all. I doubt that it was a wrong decision to let you join Hydra after your father died. The psychiatrist's profile was fabricated by Nick Fury, as mentioned earlier. Hearing the elder's words, Senator Stern was obviously taken aback. I secretly sent someone to investigate for a long time. What was the real identity of the Silver Knight who appeared with Captain America when he was dealing with Obadiah Stane? The results were not investigated. Now the elder actually already knows his true identity? Well, it seems that the original investigation results indeed found Suche. It's just that I didn't care about it. After all, the information above is too clear. Suche was originally just a psychiatrist who was squeezed out and open a coffee shop by himself. Although it is very close to Steve and Tony Stark, there is no doubt about it originally. No matter how you look at it, you are a common person, so it was ruled out by itself. Unexpectedly, the real identity of Silver Moon Knight is actually a young man. Don't touch him. Looking at the expression on Stern's face, the elder warned very solemnly. Since this Silver Moon Knight, named Su-Che, doesn't care if his identity is revealed or even hides it, then it means that he either doesn't know the existence of our HYDRA, or just don't care at all. You should have seen his ability. Bullets and even miniature bombs can't cause any damage to him. It also happens to have the ability to use water to control extremely terrifying disasters. This proves that people have enough confidence in their cards. Looking at Stern, the Elder of Hydra looked extremely stern. Remember, our main task is to complete the Insight Plan. Under this great plan, no one matters. So, don't send people to do something like assassination, but create an enemy instead. It's too stupid. Hearing the Elder's stern tone, Senator Stern nodded solemnly. He said that he would never use the power of darkness to engage in assassinations, kidnappings, and the like. Until after the elders left, Senator Stern breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his hand to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead. What the hell? Someone who is almost in his 70s still treats himself like a child, pointing his nose and scolding idiots. I don't even look at how many years I can live. I really thought I lived as long as Steve Rogers. Leaning heavily on the sofa, after the tense nerves were relieved, a strong sense of fatigue surged up. However, it is indeed necessary to quickly cut off all related private channels of Obadiah Stine. After all, this guy is dead, and the money he gave to himself over the years is enough to spend the rest of his life. The hearing about Tony Stark will be held, and it will add some troubles to Tony Stark and make him incompetent in duplication. For that Silver Moon Knight, he has to create some troubles for him. Definitely, stupid things like assassination and kidnapping can't be done by yourself. However, adding a little difficulty on the surface, and then distracting him, save him and Tony Stark from holding on to this clue and not letting go. Well, let the IRS folks look into it. Even if the taxes and the like are relatively clean, it can still distract him a bit. Thinking of this, Stern raised his hand and rubbed his cheeks. This day, don't I just collect some money from Obadiah Stine? It really is. Stern was stunned by the elder's scolding and planned to use his power on the surface to add some trouble to Su-Che and Tony Stark. As everyone knows, Che also wants to trouble this Senator Stern at this moment, especially when Natasha Romanoff told Steve and himself about the incident at the Hydra base in Sokovia. In order to protect Wanda and Pietro, it can't be connected with Wanda Pietro. So I hope myself and Steve can help think about how to destroy the Sokovia HYDRA base without implicating the twins in 3.2. In an instant, a perfect plan appeared in Su-Che's mind. Back then, the guy from the Hydra base in Sokovia attacked him secretly. I still remember this enemy. It's because of Ni himself, the superhero of a parallel world. In addition, I don't have too many suitable excuses. Otherwise, he would have personally gone to Sokovia to destroy the Man of Steel long after he obtained it. Look, isn't this delivered to your door now? As for linking, this is easy. Tony Stark is investigating Obadiah Stine's private channel, that money transfer account, right? That remittance account can be this guy Stern. Whether it is him or not, it can be him. Others don't know his true identity, but he knows it himself. Hydra. Then, it was discovered accidentally from him, a member of HYDRA, that he had connections with Sokovia. It could be through Tony's investigation, or through Natasha Romanoff's investigation. In this way, Yamato and Pietro were picked out. Even if it is time to destroy the Sokovia HYDRA base, SHILD's Hydra investigation will also find that the problem originally appeared on Senator Stern. In this way, he not only completed his revenge, but also, according to Natasha Romanoff's expectation, not to involve Wanda and Pietro in this matter. Jeez, perfect. Chapter 97. Look, Captain America is lying for Sue. In fact, the basis of all this is still based on that paradox. As the holder of the Black Gold Diary, Natasha Romanoff knows that Su-Che is a superhero from a parallel world. But Natasha Romanoff wants to pretend that she only knows that Suche is the Silver Moon Knight, not that he is from a parallel world. So this time, not only Suche was found. At the same time, Steve was also called over. And the point is that Hydra and Sokovia, on the surface, the main target is Steve, to let him figure out a way. As Captain America, Steve is the most familiar of them all with HYDRA. After all, who made Steve Hydra's biggest rival? Whether the era is the same or not, Steve is a thorn in Hydra's heart, so it looks a lot like Natasha Romanoff looking to Captain America for help. Well, at least on the surface. But in fact, Natasha Romanoff's real target is Suche, because Natasha Romanoff knows Suche's true identity through the Black Gold Diary. So she thinks that Suche definitely has a way, while bypassing Wanda and Pietro, will find the 22 incidents of Hydra in Sokovia reasonable. And Natasha Romanoff knows, as long as it's about Wanda and Pietro, then Suche will definitely not sit idly by. See, kill two birds with one stone. It can not only protect Wanda and Pietro, but also let Suche shoot. I won't let him know that I know his true identity. For now, at least, Steve looks contemplative as he listens to what he's telling, as if he's thinking of a countermeasure. But Suche obviously became serious, at least on the surface. But Suche can also be found through Natasha Romanoff's devious, solution-seeking behavior. Natasha Romanoff is indeed convinced of her identity as Parallel World Avenger. This is a good thing. At least it means that the establishment of one's own people is very stable. It may be nothing on weekdays, but Suche can be himself if he wants to be himself. But once something happens, it's like this kind of sudden thing now. Suche knew that he had to come up with some dry goods. In this way, you can be more realistic about your personality. This matter really cannot involve the twins Wanda and Pietro. Aside, Steve, who was sitting next to Suche, looked at Suche and Natasha Romanoff seriously and said, Wanda and Pietro are only 15 years old. Although they have joined HYDRA, they were still young when they came here, and they didn't know what Hydra means at all. Secondly, I really understand them. They lost their parents when they were 8 years old. I don't know how much effort and hardship they have to pay in order to survive. So, it's not their fault that they join HYDRA, whether it's because they don't know the situation or because they want a bite to live on. Now, they finally have a new life and hard-won hope. We must not ruin their future because of this incident. Having said that, Steve took a deep breath. Then he turned his head to look at Suche. Sue, what Natasha Romanoff means is that he is worried that we will directly destroy the Hydra base. In case there are still hidden Hydra forces in this world, after they discover that the Sokovia base has been destroyed. Maybe it will be related to Wanda Pietro. This kind of hypothesis cannot be said to be non-existent. Even if there is only one chance in 10,000, we can't gamble. So Sue, your intelligence is very high. So do you have any way to bypass the twins Wanda and Pietro and discover the Sokovia HYDRA base justifiably? Listening to Steve's question, Natasha Romanoff immediately set her eyes on Suche. If it were not for the holder of the Black Gold Diary, it would not be possible to disclose this situation like any non-Black Gold Diary holder, including Suche himself. Natasha Romanoff, who was very worried about Wanda and Pietro, confessed to Suche a long time ago that she knew about Suche's true identity. Well, Steve definitely believes that Suche can definitely do it. He was full of confidence in Suche. After all, in his cognition, only he knows this world. Sue and himself are the same kind of person. It's just that one person has been frozen for nearly 70 years, and the other person's former world has been destroyed. As stated earlier, Suche told Steve about this. So in the face of Steve's eyes that he's sure he can do it, and Natasha Romanoff's very serious expression, Suche knows it's time to come up with some dry goods. Stern, he took out his mobile phone, opened the search page of the website, and then found out the identity information and photo of Senator Stern and handed it to the two people. Member Stern, looking at the table, there are several photos of Senator Stern displayed inside. Natasha Romanoff asked Suche curiously, "Is this related to him?" "Definitely. As far as I know, This Senator Stern is ostensibly a member of the Senate of Congress, but the actual identity is also one of the members of HYDRA. Looking at the two people, Suche showed a rare expression of seriousness. If you want to bypass Wanda and Pietro to discover and destroy the Hydra base, that Congressman Stern is the best blame taker. Tony has been investigating some anonymous accounts on Obadiah Stein's private channels for some time. If we can take advantage of this opportunity, we can bring Congressman Stern in and make his account the private account that Tony investigates. Then there is a reason for the discovery of the Hydra base in Sokovia. After all, his identity as Hydra is the best clue. Listening to Suche's words, Natasha Romanoff's eyes lit up immediately. I'll do this. Isn't it just turning Stern's account into one of Obadiah Stein's private channel accounts? It's easy for me. Natasha Romanoff knew that Suche definitely had a way, and it was a reasonable and legal way that no Hydra member could find fault in the investigation. After all, as one of the members of the Avengers alliance in the parallel world, Suche is sure that 590 has fought them for countless times. Definitely, there are things that should be asked. This makes it appear that I don't know Suche's true identity. Sue, how did you know that Senator Stern is a member of HYDRA? Looking at Suche, Natasha Romanoff pretended to be curious and asked. Listening to Natasha Romanoff's deliberate inquiry, Suche pretended to ponder for a moment. I have some private channels. Okay, don't ask about this matter, Natasha Romanoff, since this matter is very simple to you. Then I will trouble you to bring this Congressman Stern into it. Steve on the side saw Natasha Romanoff's curious look and interrupted on purpose. Well, as friends, as the only person who knows Suche's true identity, Steve felt that if Sue didn't want to tell the truth, then I have to smooth things over for him. Hearing what Steve said, Natasha Romanoff nodded. Okay, leave this to me, but I need your cooperation. Looking at Steve, Natasha Romanoff smiled. Well, sure enough, Steve knew Sue's true identity. Otherwise, I wouldn't be rounding things up for soda at this time. TSK, a table, 3 people, everyone thinks they know the truth, and they're still hiding the truth they know. Not to mention, it's pretty interesting. Chapter 98 Loki. I just miss my big brother a little bit. New Mexico town. Loki, why are you down too? Looking at Loki, who suddenly appeared, Thor, who was watching the program on TV, was suddenly full of surprises. Are you here to pick me up? Loki, Father must be willing to forgive my recklessness, yes? Looking at Loki in a suit and a scarf around his neck, Thor asked excitedly. Looks like it's doing well on Earth. Facing Thor, who hugged himself hard to express his excitement, and then grinned. Loki looked around at his surroundings. Well, the room is not as big as the room in Asgard, though. The decoration is not as magnificent as my own or Thor's palace. However, it is better than giving people a very warm feeling. Especially looking at Thor's spirit is very good at this moment. When he came by himself, he was still drinking beer and watching the show. I didn't become as decadent and lost as Heimdall said, just because I couldn't pick up Mjolnir anymore. This proves that during this time, Thor is very satisfied with his current life. Thor, it seems that you are still enjoying your current life. That's because I have a really good girlfriend. Listening to Loki's words, Thor kept talking to Loki excitedly. How good his girlfriend Doris is, how gentle, kind, and considerate. Speaking of excitement, Thor even started dancing. As if otherwise, it would be impossible to describe to Loki how perfect his girlfriend is. Facing Thor dancing with hands and feet, Loki just watched him quietly with a smile on his face. Gradually, Thor, who was originally excited, also slowly stopped sharing with him. Although, he really wants to continue telling how perfect his girlfriend Doris is now. He wanted to tell Loki that the adjectives he just used couldn't even express 1/10,000th of Doris' perfection. I also want to let Loki know how lucky he is to meet her on Earth. But looking at Loki's calm expression, after Thor gradually stopped, he asked with some uncertainty, Is Loki something bad happened to Asgard? Tell me, Loki, is something wrong with Asgard? Facing Thor's suddenly serious appearance. Just like in the past 1,500 years, he has to act like he was before, being impulsive and reckless again and again. Loki, who originally wanted to trick Thor into telling him that his father was dead, but suddenly fell silent. After a while, Loki used magic to turn off the TV, then waved lightly, and a chair flew over. Pull up a chair and sit across from Thor. Loki put on an elegant smile again. How is it possible? With me here. What can Asgard do? Asgard is the same Asgard we are familiar with. No enemy dares to invade, and there is no civil strife within. Everything is going on as smoothly as ever. Only, just what? Thor was a little relieved when he heard Loki say that. But hearing Loki's tone, as if he was about to turn around, Thor began to raise his heart again. It's nothing, it's just, well, I'm sorry, it's my business. I can't get pardoned for your sins. Hey, I think it's a big deal. So it's just this? It's okay, don't take it to heart. Anyway, sooner or later, my father will forgive me. Hearing the sorry in Loki's tone, Thor didn't care at all. I am doing very well now. Although I have lost my strength, but I have gained a perfect girl. It looked like Thor didn't look too disappointed. Loki folded his hands on his lap and said with a smile, "It's a good mentality. It's not like you used to be. But speaking of it, Thor, I was really jealous of you back then. It's like no matter what you do, you'll always be more popular than me. Hey, isn't this normal? You know, I'm the first in line to the throne of Asgard, and you're the second in line. As a big brother, I am naturally more excellent than your younger brother. This is what it should be." Listening to Loki's words, Thor is very confident that Loki is right. This is not humble at all, and it can even be said to be a shameless admission, but it directly made Loki laugh. This guy is still so clueless. After the two brothers smiled face to face for a while, Loki stopped smiling and then said, "In the past, I especially hoped that you could disappear so that I can prove to my father that I can do everything better than you. But Thor, my big brother, when you were not in Asgard, I suddenly realized that I seemed to miss you a little bit," seemingly affectionate. But Loki changed the subject in the next second. "To be honest, I'm not used to having a chattering, impulsive, reckless, and arrogant idiot around me." Listening to Loki talking, he began to mock himself. Thor laughed out of habit. It's still a familiar recipe, and it's still a familiar taste. This is Loki. This is the brother who grew up with him since he was a child. If he really would really praise himself and say he misses himself, then he wouldn't be Loki. Learn the friendly gestures learned during this time with the residents of the small town. Thor raised a middle finger at Loki. "Don't be complacent, Loki. I will go back sooner or later. When I go back to Asgard, I will definitely annoy you by living in your room every day. By the way, Mother misses you very much, and Sif and Fandral miss you too. It's just that you also know that you are being exiled now, so I can only come and see you. Well, it seems that you're doing well so far, so I can rest assured." With that said, Loki got up and looked at Thor with a smile. "I can't stay on Earth for too long, so I have to go back. Is there anything I need to bring to Mother and Sif?" When he first came, Loki originally wanted to deceive and deceive. However, looking at Thor, who has lost his divine power, he still enjoys life on Earth for now. Loki suddenly felt actually let him stay on Earth like this might be a good choice too. The purpose is the same. There is no need to punish the heart. After all, Hemwall might still be watching. Moreover, if Thor can really stay on the Earth and live like a common, then I don't mind coming over to see him every once in a while. As for the matter that the father fell into a deep sleep to cultivate his body and nourish his divine calendar, and the plan that oneself prepare next, Loki isn't going to tell Thor. Unlike the original Thor 1, Lu came down from Asgard and told Thor's sense words differently. Loki is not worried at the moment. Thor strongly wants to lift Mjolnir back to Asgard. At least, during this time of the conversation, Loki didn't feel the kind of longing that Thor had. Or rather, the desire to return to Asgard was not so strong. This puts Loki at ease a lot. In fact, this is also very normal. Good job. After all, when Thor was exiled, Loki was also very confused. He's all set in his heart how to ruin Thor's coronation, how to make Thor impulsively provoke the Ice Titan, and then let Rage's father exile Thor. But before he could take any action, Thor was exiled by his father directly. Initiative, the same as exile, but the results are not the same. It's very different, at least from Loki's point of view. And now, father fell into a deep sleep, and mother accompanied father home. Taking charge of Asgard himself, Thor is doing pretty well on Earth. Then, there is no need to trouble yourself. Well, there is no Loki who has experienced Thor's most glorious and coronation ceremony, surrounded by all the people of Asgard. Although the jealous heart is still there, and still jealous of his father's preference for Thor. However, at this moment, it has not yet reached the extreme. At least, I am now the acting king of Asgard, and Thor, his own big brother. They are just common people who have been deprived of their divine power. Chapter 99 Loki. He actually bullied me in front of me. Bah! Picked up Mjolnir. Farewell to Thor. Loki did not return directly to Asgard. Instead, they came to the base where Shield was temporarily stationed. After all, Mjolnir is here. Because of the use of magic, others can't see the roadbed at all. So Loki made it all the way to Mjolnir unhindered. Just arrived here and saw a middle-aged man in a black suit, talking to another guy who looked younger. Loki doesn't know Phil Coulson, and certainly doesn't know why Phil Coulson seems to have a lot to say. The real reason is that Phil Coulson is a big fan of Steve Rogers. But Loki knew Steve Rogers. Heimdall told himself about him. He's mentioned because he's the guy on Earth who picked up Mjolnir. Because the task this time is very important. Watching Phil Coulson talking endlessly in front of him, Steve was not bored. When Natasha Romanoff chatted with herself, she said how much Phil Coulson admired herself. Therefore, Steve thinks it should be understandable, even if the person involved is himself. I didn't expect that after nearly 70 years of slumber in a new era, I would have to face the old friend. Oh, it's just that this time the old friend has been enhanced a lot, so I also specially came here to enhance it. It can't be too retro, right? Looking at the idol in front of 407, he seems to be very optimistic, but there is always a hint of sadness between his brows. Phil Coulson thought that his idol hadn't adjusted to this world yet. So he quickly said, actually, some old retro methods are still very effective sometimes. After all, no matter how new the times are, in the end, the retro methods are better. Maybe, but you'll have to try it out. Listening to Phil Coulson comforting himself, Steve smiled at him. Then came to Mjolnir. Seeing this scene, Phil Coulson took 2 steps back, his eyes fixed on his idol. I don't know if I have a chance to get my idol to sign my name for those cards I treasure in my pocket. On the contrary, Loki looked at Steve, who walked in front of Mjolnir, with a strange light in his eyes. The mood at the moment is very complicated. On the one hand, Aid's artifact was picked up by a mere earthling, and he picked it up in front of his face. This makes Loki feel unacceptable. You know, even I can't pick up this Mjolnir. How can a mere ant-like earthling be qualified to pick up this Mjolnir? That kind of feeling is like the goddess I have been pursuing. She has never pretended to me. No matter how hard she tried, she was cold to herself. But when he turned his head, he threw himself into the arms of the beggar with a smile and happiness in front of him. This makes Loki very unacceptable. On the other hand, this Mjolnir is the symbol of Thor. When he got Mjolnir, everyone congratulated him, thinking that he was the best choice for the next king of Asgard. I am full of jealousy, but now, Thor was deprived of his divine power and exiled to the earth. The hammer that he used to show off in front of himself, which symbolized his identity, was picked up by the people on Earth. Does that make Loki a little relieved? For a moment, Loki's mood was extremely complicated, especially after seeing Mjolnir being picked up by Steve Rogers. Loki was silent for a moment. There were no other redundant actions, but turned around and disappeared. Loki had just left, and Steve's slightly frowning brows gradually relaxed. Maybe I was thinking too much? But the moment he picked up Mjolnir, Steve always felt that there was nothing but Phil Coulson behind him. Someone else is watching him. Captain Rogers, are you ready to leave now? Seeing Steve holding Mjolnir, Phil Coulson took a step forward and asked with a smile. Actually, we have prepared dinner here, I think. Next time. Hearing the unsure invitation in Phil Coulson's tone, Steve Rogers held the hammer and smiled. Keki. Anyway, since I have thawed out of the ice, there is still a lot of time in the future. The first time I came here on a Coin-style battle, the purpose was to get the hammer and then go back to formulate combat missions. For dinner, there is a chance next time. All right, after all, the task is very important. Listening to the idol's rejection, Phil Coulson was not surprised. After all, as one of the SHIELD agents, Phil Coulson understood the task. It's just a little bit of regret in my heart. But it doesn't matter. Next time you must ask your idol to help you sign the treasure card. Well, next time for sure. Personally send Steve Rogers, his own idol, aboard a Quinjet. Watching Steve leave his base here in New Mexico in a Quinjet. Phil Coulson stood there until the plane disappeared from sight, then turned around and picked up the phone and dialed out while walking. Originally, I wanted to call my girlfriend who played the cello and tell her that I had come into close contact with my idol. But as soon as this idea came up, the hand involuntarily dialed the number of Medusa Doris. The secrecy mechanism of SHIELD has long been engraved in Phil Coulson's bones. What can and cannot be said, Phil Coulson knows very well. Even now, it has been circulated everywhere on the internet. Captain America and Moon Knight team up to save Iron Man Tony Stark's video. At the same time, I need them to save me. I'm a great genius. No difficulty can stop me. Listening to Suche asking himself, where did his new life assistant go? Inside the villa, Tony Stark began to complain while handing Suche a glass of wine. So, that new assistant of yours got fired? Definitely. How could I allow SHIELD's agent to steal my research data? He lightly clinked glasses with Suche, and then the two drank the wine in their glasses in one gulp. After a while, Tony Stark spread his hands and said, well, actually, I didn't expect that my new life assistant was someone from S.H.I.E.L.D. I guess it was the last time I didn't say according to the hand card they designated, but directly announced in front of the media that I was Iron Man, which made them lose face. That's why you asked that agent to apply for the job. What did you say before you left to save my life? I need them to save me, but the version I heard seems to be different. Watching Tony pretend to be upset on purpose. Suche picked up the red wine and poured himself a glass. I heard from them that you have been poisoned deeply, and if you can't solve it, it's probably over. Chapter 100 Unexpectedly. Tony actually found him. Hearing what Suche said, Tony Stark cut his throat. But obviously, he didn't have any refutation. For the matter of palladium element poisoning, he couldn't find any good solution now anyway. So it can only be relieved by drinking chlorophyll juice. Haven't you ever thought of taking out the fragments in the blood vessels near the heart through surgery dash? Sitting on the woolen carpet, Suche held a wine glass, looked at the distorted Tony Stark through the dark red wine, and asked, come on, man. I don't believe this is possible with the current level of medical care. Also sitting on the wool carpet, Tony Stark bent his legs and leaned on the sofa and raised his hand. If it's just a normal injury, it's fine. But the problem is the tiny fragments of that bomb are all in the blood vessels. Now I can only rely on the energy of this arc reactor to absorb those tiny shrapnel. Surgery? I estimate that 80% of them will fail. You have to have some confidence in yourself. Listening to Tony's words, Suche leaned back. After all, there are so many top doctors in the world. Maybe they can come up with the most reasonable plan. Well, in Iron Man 3, Tony's surgery was very successful. Then in Avengers Alliance 4, Tony Stark smashed the arc reactor directly into Steve's hand. I have a lot of confidence in myself, but I don't have a lot of confidence in the doctors. So I'm looking for a way by myself. Here, those two boxes over there are my new assistant, the agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. She took people and handed over all my father's relics stored in SHIELD to me. Speaking of this, Tony Stark sneered. These guys don't think that I can't find a solution for the time being. My old man who has been dead for so many years, will there be any way? By the way, I'll show you something. As he spoke, Tony Stark took out an obedience from the side and handed it to Suche. Taking the faith handed over by Tony, Ian opened it and glanced at it. The discovery was a document of a hearing. This group of idiots think my Mark armor is a weapon, so they hold a hearing just for me, hoping that we will hand over the Mark armor or disclose the core information of the armor like them. Hey, buddy, what do you think these idiots think? They actually want me to reveal the core secrets of the armor to them. If they have a Mark armor on their side by then, am I still the only Iron Man? Looking at the hearing documents in his hand, Suche threw them on the ground. You have been notified to attend the hearing, and my coffee shop has also been audited by the IRS. Don't you think it's a coincidence? IRS? Are they bothering you? Yes. leaning on the sofa, spread his hands. Suche said to Tony, "The manager of my Teowalan cafe is that girl named Selena. Why, her total income this month is nearly $7,000. In addition to the basic salary of the store manager, which is $500 a week and $2,000 a month, there are also tips for customers and some money for points and so on. The total is $7,000. In addition to the part-time jobs that are not counted as part-time jobs, college students who only work a few hours a day and get hourly wages are part-time jobs. Other regular employees of the coffee shop can get 2,000 to 3,000 yuan a month, so the IRS thinks there is something wrong with the books of my coffee shop." Hearing Suche's calculation of the account, Tony Stark was not surprised at all. "If I were the IRS, I would also investigate you. After all, judging from the current hourly salary standards of the workers' union for restaurants, coffee shops, hotels, and other service industries, 10 is considered very standard for land use. Not counting the girl named Selena and the part-time employees of the college students, the regular employees of the coffee shop plus tips can get 2,000 to 3,000 a month. If you don't check, what are you looking for? It was not found in 2008. It was calculated according to the 10-year timeline trade union standard." Speaking of this, Wong Stark suddenly reacted. The body that was originally sitting on the carpet and leaning against the sofa also sat up again. Seeing Suche, who was still smiling and seemed to have no surprises, he said suspiciously, "You mean it is very likely that some people have already guessed that you are the Silver Moon Knight? 11, if that's the case, then it all makes a lot more sense. I was investigating the secret accounts of Obadiah Stein's private channel, so I encountered a hearing. You helped me as a Silver Moon Knight, but the coffee shop was audited by the IRS. So, I'm the one who got you involved." Speaking of this, Tony Stark nodded thoughtfully. "However, it will not only allow the IRS to be dispatched, but also allow those guys in Congress to initiate a hearing against me. This shows that the people we are investigating have a good background. They may even be members of Congress." 21 As he spoke, Tony Stark's eyes lit up, and he immediately stood up from the ground. "Dude, just keep on drinking slowly. I'll use this clue to reverse things. Asking for flowers?" After finishing speaking, Tony Stark walked aside and turned on the computer. At the same time, let JRVS retrieve all the information of the Speaker and member of the Congress. Watching Tony Stark start investigating in the right direction, Suche was holding a glass of wine and seemed to be playing with his phone boredly, actually texting Natasha Romanoff. She can start it and pour dirty water on Senator Stern. Tony Stark's investigation to Stern was arrested and found out that his real identity is HYDRA, accidentally found the Hydra base in Sokovia. Tisk, it's a perfect closed loop, isn't it? Look, that takes Wanda and Pietro out. Even if Hydra reverses the investigation, it can only find clues from the root cause of Stern. In this way, they can only curse Stern in the dark. And through Stern, maybe we can't dig out more clues of HYDRA. That's why we must start from Tony Stark's side. There must be a valid reason for everything, including the destruction of the Hydra base in Sokovia. Every link must have perfect evidence and accidental discoveries. It's just when Suche didn't expect it. I just sent a text message to Natasha Romanoff, reminding her that she can start working not long ago. It is estimated that Natasha Romanoff has not produced all the clues yet. Tony has a new discovery here. Damn it, I knew it couldn't be that simple. He clapped his hands lightly and enlarged the projection of the whole system to the front of Su-D. Soon, a photo composed of light blue holographic projections appeared in front of Suche. "Man, I found some key evidence based on the accounts of those members of Congress." Although he went through layers of stacking and even had some anonymous cleansing records of banks in small foreign countries, he still found the owner of the damned anonymous account according to the list. It's this congressman named Stern, damn it. How could there be a hearing? You must know that he is the chairperson of the hearing that has not yet been held. I guess you were investigated by the IRS, and it's his fault. Look at the photos displayed on the holographic projection in front of you. For a moment, Suche was a little surprised. Unexpectedly, Natasha Romanoff has not started the water splashing project yet. Tony actually found him here. TSK. It takes no effort at all, little one.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.